Lord of Mysteries. Survival from the Secret Doll Chapter 251 to 260. In the carriage heading to Welch's residence, Klein, Pellegro, Daly, and Dunn sat facing each other in pairs. This is a spell, recited in ancient Hermes. As long as you are in Tingen City, in the event of an insurmountable or extremely urgent situation, you can use this spell to attract attention and transmit information. Pellegro took out a palm-sized piece of parchment from his pocket and handed it to Klein, who was sitting on the same side as him. After Klein took it, he saw that the carefully folded parchment was written in neat handwriting, describing a passage in 3 languages, Loen, Hermes, and Ancient Hermes. All incorrect errors, the embodiment of fallacies and loopholes, the hands of fate that lead the way. This. Klein's heart trembled slightly, and he looked up at Pellegro. Pellegro nodded, concise and to the point. Grandpa should have told you that sequence potions, after reaching sequence 4, which is the demigod level, will produce divinity. This is also the main reason why Beyonders can be called half god, half human, after reaching sequence 4. And one of the reasons why sequence pathways are called paths of the gods is because all spiritual things can gradually improve their position step by step through potion formulas and corresponding Beyonder characteristics, constantly bringing themselves closer to the gods. Sequence 4 and sequence 3 are called saints, while sequence 2 and sequence 1 are called angels. In sequences 2 and 1, the Beyonders are extraordinary creatures corresponding to them in ancient times, can also be called. Pellegro lowered his voice and said, from the gods. From the gods, the beings closest to the gods, possessing a portion of the gods' authority, are true mythical creatures. You should have seen the honorific names of the goddess, the Lord of Storms, and the God of Craftsmen. In the fields of ritualistic magic and basic mysticism, 3-part honorific names are common among gods and angels of sequence 1 and sequence 2, the from the gods. Of course, the honorific names of the from the gods still have certain limitations. Using 3-part honorific names may not be effective for them. They must be carefully designed, using symbolic elements and considering many things to complete. Such honorific names have mystical guidance. As long as they are recited in a language that can leverage supernatural power, it is possible to get a response. And this is the core element of most ritualistic magic. Klein was silent for a moment, digesting Pellegro's explanation, and then asked while thinking, is this the honorific name of a certain from the god? And in Tingen City, compared to the goddess of the night, the Lord of Storms, and the God of Craftsmen, reciting his honorific name can attract the other party's attention, gain the other party's protection, and thus protect oneself. Daly, who was sitting opposite him, smiled and said, yes, in Tingen City, this one is more important than the goddess, the Lord of Storms, and the God of Craftsmen. Klein quickly made an analogy. Ms. Daly, does that mean that as long as I am in Tingen City, I can gain protection by reciting his honorific name? At the same time, Klein also thought of a question, if I recite this honorific name outside Tingen City, what will happen? No response. Many ritualistic magic spells that pray to the gods can be answered throughout the kingdom of Loen. If the honorific name of a from the god can only be answered in Tingen City, then is this the difference between a from the god and a true god? While Klein's thoughts were racing and he was brainstorming, Daly shook her head. That's the case in most situations, but there are always exceptions, just like some men who look tall and mighty can't last long at night. Daly. Dunn, who was next to her, helplessly rubbed his forehead. Ms. Daly, your speaking style has always been like this. The corner of Klein's mouth twitched slightly. Your example is good, just don't use it like that next time. All right, Daly chuckled. She turned to Klein. The accurate statement is that the church does not prohibit us from praying to him or seeking protection, but the church does not support it either, because we cannot be sure whether he will respond or in what way he will respond. However, in Tingen City, the result of reciting such an honorific name often develops in a good direction. Little guy, I know what you're thinking. What will happen if you recite such an honorific name outside Tingen City, right? Klein smiled awkwardly, muttering to himself, Ms. Daly, you don't have to read my mind. Daly smiled slightly. Regarding this question, I can give you an example. I once saw a craftsman's believer praying to the Lord of Storms for power in a certain situation. Then, a bolt of lightning struck from the sky, killing the craftsman's believer on the spot. Speaking of this, Daly pointed to Klein, pointed to herself, Dunn, and Pellegro. In Tingen City, we won't have any problems reciting this honorific name, but once we leave Tingen City, reciting such an honorific name may result in errors. fallacies, loopholes, being deceived by fate, and a series of other events. This does not depend on our identity, status, or strength. In front of those true mythical creatures, their mere gaze can bring about terrifying consequences that we absolutely cannot bear. So, seer, Mr., you must understand that in the world of the extraordinary, many things cannot be investigated in depth and must not be taken lightly. Some things, just understanding them and attracting attention, can bring about destruction. Of course, if you want to drag your enemies down with you, then pretend I didn't say anything. This might be a good way to perish together. Klein. The world of Beyonders is truly terrifying. The carriage quickly arrived at Welch's residence. As before, when Klein came here last time, before the carriage entered, Welch's and Naya's bizarrely dead villa looked dark and lifeless, exuding an aura of death. But after crossing a certain boundary, it suddenly became bright, without any haze, and any evil spirits or dangers were completely submerged by the light, unable to remain. However, unlike last time, the Tingen University Security Department personnel were not here. The light source here did not come from mineral lamps, but from the earth and the natural light emitted from the air. A purification ritual, using a lot of sung well ore as ritual materials. Tingen University is really as wealthy as ever. Daly looked at the extravagant waste outside the window with a hint of a smile on her lips. The eyeshadow on her face made her look even more mysterious, more like a wizard who possessed mysterious powers than Pelagro, who was a warlock. She is a Sequence 5 gatekeeper. Sequence 5 is already a powerful Beyonder who is about to open the door to divinity. It can be seen that both Tingen University and the Night Church attach great importance to the loss of the Antigonus family's notebook. The group of four got out of the carriage and walked into the villa. Similarly, Officer Pelagro once again took out a candle from who knows where. Klein didn't see clearly anyway. He was now a bit curious about how many hidden pockets Pettigrew had and how much stuff he had packed. After entering the area created by the ritual, recite the ancient Hermes words of that honorific name I just taught you. Pettigrew paused here and asked Klein, do you remember the incantation? Although Hermes and ancient Hermes languages are similar in many ways, the latter is used to leverage the power of nature. If you mispronounce it, you might attract something strange. Of course, in Tingen City, the dangerous one is probably not Klein, who mispronounces the incantation. This time, the ritual host is not me, but you. I cannot remind you of the corresponding ancient Hermes pronunciation from the outside by reciting the incantation. Klein, Ed, and then added, it doesn't matter. If I forget, I can remember it through divination. You are accepting the seer potion very quickly. Perhaps it won't be long before you can completely digest the seer potion. Dunn looked at Klein and said, yes, Captain, I also look forward to the day when I finish digesting it. Klein imitated Pettigrew's address and said to Dunn. Dunn nodded. Then let's begin. Pettigrew, after entering that area created by the ritual, take the candle, and then recite that honorific name. I, the captain, and Ms. Daly can then enter that area through you as a medium, and based on your spirituality, search for the whereabouts of that Antigonus family notebook. Okay. Klein nodded. Pettigrew nodded and quickly lit the candle in his hand by rubbing it with spirituality. The blue-black flame soared up. Klein's mind was in a trance again. Because he had the previous experience, and because he had become a Beyonder, Klein quickly adapted to this strange state, as if his soul had left his body. Then, he once again appeared in the empty living room filled with gray-white mist. And this time, whether it was because Klein had become a seer, or not, the sounds he heard and the images he saw were clearer than the last time he entered here. Klein saw two dark figures hanging in the center of the living room. The wind, blowing from nowhere, made the two corpses swaying in the wind. Klein held his breath, afraid of triggering something because he appeared here. Fortunately, the terrifying story of Welch and Naya's corpses suddenly arguing and jumping off the rope to chase him did not develop. He was able to successfully obtain the blue-black candle not far away. Klein lowered his head and began to recite, quite piously, in ancient Hermes, which could leverage supernatural language, to the candle burning with a blue-black flame. All incorrect errors. The embodiment of fallacies and loopholes. The hands of fate that lead. He recited this string of incantations quite naturally and fluently, and there was no situation where he mispronounced the incantation or suddenly forgot it. And after he said the honorific name of a certain being in ancient Hermes, the blue-black candle flame in his hand suddenly soared upwards. When the surrounding gray-white mist touched the soaring candle flame, it quickly expanded and contracted, becoming even more gloomy and deep. At the same time, Klein felt a gaze. It seemed that some being cast its gaze from a very distant place. Just as he was thinking about whether it was the gaze cast by that angel, who he didn't know whether was Sequence 2 or Sequence 1, Klein suddenly heard the sound of the rope breaking behind him, and the corpses of Welch and Naya hanging in the living room crashed to the ground. Klein, Klein. A shrill roar rang out behind Klein. Klein couldn't think so much. He held the candle and quickly turned around. His pupils suddenly dilated. Welch and Naya's corpses, at some point, had been combined together in a strange, twisted way. No, it had 2 heads and 4 arms and legs. It crawled and rushed towards Klein's direction at a high speed. Why aren't you dead yet? Why haven't you died yet? Why, I curse you, die quickly, why aren't you dead yet? You should be dead, you are already dead. One sharp, frantic voice after another rushed into Klein's ears. Klein was stunned in place, his mind like a rusty gear, unable to turn in this sharp cry after cry. The blue-black candle flame expanded once again. At this moment, Klein heard a chuckle in his ear, seemingly with some playfulness. Then, the monster composed of logic, loopholes, and errors froze. Klein's sluggish mind also returned to its original body, no longer becoming unable to turn. Why? The monster composed of Welch and Naya's corpses, like a deformed creation that should not exist in this world, was devoured by the surrounding invisible gray-white mist. In the gray mist, 3 figures gradually appeared. What happened? Pettigrew looked at the place where Welch and Naya had just been devoured. Klein briefly described what he had just seen and heard. I seemed to hear someone laughing. Klein wanted to describe it, but was interrupted by Dunn sternly. This is related to that being, you don't need to explain. Okay, Klein closed his mouth. He actually always wanted to ask. Who exactly is that? Which angel, which deity, does that honorific name describe? Does that have anything to do with Miskatonic University and fellow villagers? Klein didn't notice that on his astral body, silently, a figure composed of countless translucent worms with 12 transparent rings was straightening his black silk hat, as if growing out of his astral body, and had a close connection with Klein's spirit. This voice composed of countless worms smiled and looked around at the gray mist, as if seeing through the gray mist to the spirit world, seeing another figure exactly like him above the spirit world, and seeing a gate of light and countless crimson stars. Yes, the relationship is quite close. This figure answered silently. Another person who did not exist here said faintly, having recited the honorific name, that is my person. It was you who asked Nicholas to parasitize, I didn't do anything. Having walked through the staircase filled with gray mist, the group of 4 arrived at the study on the 2nd floor. Inside the study, crimson moonlight permeated the air, a scene of desolation, just as Klein had seen before. Klein's gaze fell upon the long table in the study. Identical to his previous visit, this study, where Welch, Naya, and the original owner had discussed the Antigonus family's notebook, remained almost unchanged. Emperor Rosel's diary and the book highly suspected to be the Antigonus family's notebook lay quietly on the desk, untouched. Dunn walked in front, Neil. Pettigrew, holding a candle, stepped forward, while Daly retreated behind Klein, watching him and guarding against any accidents. After all, here, Klein Moretti was the most vulnerable. His spirituality was involved in the construction of this ritual, and his sequence was too low. Without preparation, if he encountered any danger, Klein Moretti could very likely die on the spot or lose control directly. Daly tilted her head slightly, a phantom of a large door faintly visible behind her. Dunn took the candle from Pettigrew without hesitation and brought it close to the hardcover notebook on the upper right corner of the desk. Through the bluish-black candle flame, the soul healer of the night church's gaze slightly diffused. Through the candle's flame, he seemed to see a scene. There weren't many changes around. After confirming something, Dunn took 2 steps back, while Pettigrew had already retreated after handing over the candle. High level of cooperation, is this the official extraordinary team? Klein marveled inwardly. Of course, in this 4-person configuration, he only played the role of a key and a bridge. Which meant he was the weakest. After Dunn retreated, until he reached Pettigrew's side and arrived in the safe zone, he returned the candle to Pettigrew and turned to Daly, who was standing next to the door, saying, Daly, Neil, you can start. Okay. Daly nodded and took out some black powder of unknown origin from her pocket. Pedigree also took out some black powder of unknown origin from the pocket of his coat. Under Klein's impressed gaze, the two of them threw the objects in their hands into the air. The black powder scattered, seemingly filling the entire study. The bluish-black flame of the candle in Pedigree's hand suddenly rose, engulfing the powdery objects in the air. The bluish-black flames blazed. The surrounding gray mist quickly receded, and outside the window, the cold, crimson moonlight suddenly became real. Reality and illusion began to interact, producing incomprehensible and terrifying errors. Klein saw that the angle of the crimson moonlight shining into the study from the window was constantly changing, as if the moon outside the window was violating its own rules of operation and was falling rapidly. Pedigree, along with Dunn and Daly, retreated with Klein to a corner of the study. "Look carefully," Pedigree said in a low voice. Klein inexplicably felt that all of this was very familiar, but there was always a layer of blurry, impenetrable membrane enveloping this familiarity, making it impossible to penetrate. "Next, you should feel very familiar. This is your spirituality, having already advanced to Seer, reminding you, but this reminder is interfered with by a higher level of power, so you only feel familiar and cannot recall the source of this familiarity by asking your spirituality." The ritual magic, through Klein Moretti's spirituality and the great existences, error, bypassed the limit of the Antigonus family's notebook's ability to influence and restored what had happened in this study. "So, this is the memory that I didn't know, and even the memory fragments became incomplete, before the original owner died." Klein listened quietly, thinking. As time reversed, when the crimson moonlight shining in from outside the window froze once again, Klein heard the sound of the doorknob being twisted. The door, which had been open because of their entry, was now tightly closed. As the doorknob turned, a figure very familiar to Klein entered his eyes. Klein's pupils dilated for a moment, almost exclaiming, "That's me." It was Klein Moretti, a Klein Moretti with stiff limbs, a blank expression, like a walking corpse. "This result is unexpected, yet reasonable," Daly said softly. "Let's continue watching," Dunn said, glancing at Klein, who was clearly in shock and horror, also lowering his voice. Like a flower in a mirror, the moon in the water, in the illusory and unreal study, the puppet-like Klein Moretti walked stiffly to the desk, ignoring the living people in the corner, and directly picked up the notebook, placing it inside his clothes. He took the Antigonus family's notebook and walked out. "We'll follow," Dunn said. Everyone nodded silently, without speaking, following behind the false, stiff Klein Moretti. They first passed through the corridor, past the stairs, saw Welch with a face full of blood, and saw the drowned Naya. Their bodies swayed, like monsters, standing blankly in the living room, watching Klein Moretti's phantom, and watching him leave the villa. Pedigree said, "This is the memory you forgot." In other words, Klein Moretti died one step after Welch and Naya. Was it to take away the Antigonus family's notebook? Klein remained silent. They followed the phantom of Klein Moretti, leaving Welch's residence. The sound of the wind blowing came from behind. Klein glanced back. The scene was exactly the same as what he had seen when he first entered. Welch and Naya's corpses were hanging in the living room. They silently watched the departing figure of Klein Moretti's phantom, or seemed to be watching Daly, Pedigree, Dunn, and Klein himself. They swayed and swayed. There were no carriages or pedestrians on the street. It was cold and desolate, without any trace of living people. Only a round of crimson moon hung quietly in the sky, deep and dark. Klein saw his own swaying phantom constantly walking forward, his stiff and rigid appearance making it hard not to suspect that he was the kind of puppet master who couldn't fix him, a broken puppet. Perhaps the original owner had once become a stiff puppet, manipulated by the Antigonus family's notebook, and the reason why no one noticed this was because everyone who saw the original owner as a puppet was manipulated. Klein suddenly had a terrifying, spine-chilling thought. This should be the extraordinary ability of Sequence 5 of the Seer Pathway, Master of Puppets. Dunn pondered for a moment and began to communicate with Daly. Antigonus was originally a great noble of the Solomon Empire in the Fourth Epoch, in charge of the Seer Pathway. It's not surprising that the notebook left behind by his descendants, which contains the secrets of the Seer Pathway, possesses a certain amount of mystical power. A faint light flickered in Daly's eyes. As Sequence 5 of the Corpse Collector Pathway, she could directly see spirits and protected spiritual bodies. She already had some guesses about what Klein Moretti had suffered at the time. Clearly, Seer, was also marionetted at the time. The deaths of Mr. Megwin and Ms. Naya, according to the autopsy results from Khoi University, were subjected to strong external mystical influences before their deaths. The time of their spiritual deaths was much earlier than the time of their physical deaths. This is also one of the major characteristics of a marionette. At this, Daly couldn't help but take another look at Klein. Although I don't know how you survived the manipulation of that Antigonus family notebook, it is indeed a very lucky thing. But Welch and Naya, Klein said in a low voice. Daly sighed. Obviously, they didn't have your luck. And in the world of Beyonders, good luck doesn't necessarily mean real good luck. The group followed for a while longer and discovered that the manipulated Klein Moretti was heading towards Golden Rose Street, which was Klein's residence. The Antigonus family notebook was put down and hidden along the way. Pettigrew guessed. After all, they didn't find the notebook in Klein's house. Soon enough, as expected, they saw Klein Moretti take something out of his clothes and place it on a bench a few streets away from Golden Rose Street. Klein Moretti's phantom continued to walk forward, and the Antigonus family notebook gradually disappeared and faded as he walked further and further away, eventually disappearing completely. This meant that Klein Moretti's own spirituality no longer knew what would happen next and could not restore the truth of the matter through this ritual led by Klein. Everyone knew what happened next. Klein returned to his family apartment at 47 Golden Rose Street. Influenced by the Antigonus family notebook, he shot himself in the study, but ultimately, for unknown reasons, Klein Moretti did not die. Only Welch and Naya became the ghosts of the Antigonus family notebook. The scene froze there. Dunn scanned the place where Klein had put down the notebook, turned his body, and said to Pettigrew, "All right, the ritual can end here." Pettigrew nodded and took out a handful of powder from an unknown inner pocket, scattering it on the candle burning with blue-black flames. This time, the candlelight was significantly dimmer, and the grayish-white mist gradually filled the space once again. Klein's head was dizzy again. When he came back to his senses, he was greeted by Welch's living room, which was full of pure sunlight. "It's over, little guy. Well, next you can consider asking Tingen University for compensation. After all, this is indeed a serious consequence caused by their poor supervision," Daly said, glancing at Klein. Klein was about to say something, but when he opened his mouth, he felt a burst of dizziness in his head and almost fell to the ground. "Spirituality is exhausted. Moretti, you go back first. You don't need to worry about the rest of the matter." Dunn supported Klein and said to Pettigrew, who was putting away the candles, "Pettigrew, take Klein back to his residence." "Yes, Captain." Since that ritual, Klein hadn't touched the Antigonus family notebook much in the following days. According to the arrangements of Officer Pettigrew and Dunn Smith, the current arrangement was to regularly go to 32 Red Rose Street to learn basic mysticism knowledge and ritual magic elements from Old Neil, digest his potion as much as possible, and improve his abilities. Monday afternoon, close to 3 o'clock. This afternoon was the day Klein decided to hold a mystical gathering above the gray fog. Klein planned to ask about information about Tingen City, Miskatonic University, Antigonus, and the secret order above the gray fog. Of course, in order to maintain the mystery and greatness of Mr. Fool, he couldn't directly ask his questions and had to go around a few steps. Postponing his learning time with Old Neil to the evening, Klein strode forward, and as with previous attempts, took 4 steps counterclockwise, whispering the corresponding incantations in Chinese with each step. Immortal Venerable of Flourishing Profound Yellow. Heavenly Lord of Flourishing Profound Yellow. God of Flourishing Profound Yellow. Heavenly Venerable of Flourishing Profound Yellow. After reciting the 4-part venerable name, Klein felt his body become lighter, floating upwards. He soon saw the pervasive, gray-white, boundless, hazy mist, and the deep red stars. At the same time, the gray fog rioted. Ah, dirty things ah. Parasitic on Klein's spiritual body, as if growing out of the other party's spiritual body, the Sequence 1 avatar belonging to Nicholas Flamel, looked at the gray fog that was more sublime and distant than the 7 pure lights, smiling, scrutinizing, and anticipating. Surprise. Klein didn't notice at all how the gray fog was different from the last time he ascended. Within the mysterious space above the gray fog, the young man sitting at the head of the bronze long table, wearing a black silk top hat and a matching tailcoat, stood up. He looked at the 3 deep red stars that lit up beside him, and in each star, he saw 3 clusters of things made up of countless worms. 1 cluster was stronger, and 2 clusters were weaker. One had a close connection with the gray fog, and the connection between the 2 and the gray fog was not too deep. But that was enough. Mr. Error revealed a standard smile. He straightened his top hat. Then let's begin. Today's tarot gathering. Audrey Hall, located in the Queen's District of Backland, Alger Wilson, with his rough and profound features, on the ghost ship of the Tudor Empire, had their bodies and spirits already covered with 12 segmented worms. At the same time, the deep red stars shone brightly, and a tide-like surge instantly submerged them. The gray fog rioted, even more violently. 3 clusters of worm nests carrying various pollutions, wills, madness, and malice, rapidly approached above the gray fog. Reject. I refuse. There are worms. Ah. A figure emerged from beneath the gray fog. He was draped in a deep and dark cloak, with deep eyes, looking at the mysterious space above the spirit world. Seeing the riot and rejection of the gray fog, he slowly took out a translucent mask and put it on his face. Blind stupidity, activate. The next moment, the riot of the gray fog stopped. He, it's the heavenly venerable, it's saved. When the effects of deception and trickery arrived in an instant, when the spirits of Klein, Audrey, and Alger arrived in the mysterious space above the gray fog realized what had just happened, and after the intelligence-reducing aura was lifted. Ah, worms everywhere. It's doomed. In an ancient and imposing palace, 2 figures materialized on either side of a long, bronze table, transitioning from illusion to reality, emerging from a tide of crimson. Simultaneously with their appearance, countless semi-transparent worms, each with 12 segments, burrowed out from within the bodies of these 2 individuals. These countless worms with 12 transparent segments did not converge and burrow into the body of Mr. Error, at the head of the bronze table. Instead, these time worms, unnoticed by Justice and the Hanged Man, burrowed into the vast, boundless expanse of gray-white fog, disappearing from sight. Subsequently, as if from a mirrored surface, even more worms with 12 segments emerged, these time worms differing from those that had just emerged from Justice and the Hanged Man. They continuously burrowed into the body of Mr. Error, filling him. The aura of Mr. Error grew increasingly profound and deep, increasingly resonating and connecting with the gray-white fog, with the realm above the gray fog. Mr. Error first looked up at the ceiling, then lowered his head, silently parting his lips in a smile towards Justice and the Hanged Man. The gray fog trembled slightly, but in the next moment, it returned to stillness. The 2 members of the Tarot Club did not notice this anomaly. Miss Audrey Hall, with her smooth blonde hair and tall stature, known as Justice, looked towards the head of the bronze table, at the figure wearing a top hat and tailcoat, enveloped in layers of gray-white fog, and said in a light voice, "Good afternoon, Mr. Error." When the Hanged Man, Mr. Alger Wilson, glanced at the figure at the head of the bronze table, his gaze momentarily sharpened, but he quickly forced himself to relax, suppressing the palpitations and the fear that arose from within his heart. Compared to the last time, Alger clearly felt a stronger, more terrifying sense of oppression. It was as if he were in the Storm Church headquarters, seeing those archbishops, those powerful beings who had pushed open the door to divinity, no, even more dangerous and terrifying than them. "Good afternoon, Mr. Error." Maintaining a humble tone, unlike Miss Justice, who was unaware of this change, the Hanged Man, Mr. Alger, greeted the being at the head of the bronze table. "Good afternoon, Miss Justice, Mr. the Hanged Man." In front of Mr. Error lay the same unknown book that Audrey and Alger had seen before. This great being sat at the head of the bronze table, now leisurely observing the 2 members of the Tarot Club. "You may begin." Upon hearing this, Audrey eagerly looked at the Hanged Man. "Alger, you should have received the blood of the ghost shark, right?" "Indeed." Alger nodded slightly, without wasting any words, and informed Miss Justice, Audrey, of the Seer Potion formula. Seer, Sequence 9 Potion, 80 ml of pure water, plus 5 drops of autumn cypress essence, plus 13 grams of bovine tooth peony powder, plus 7 petals of elf flower, plus a pair of adult manhar fish eyes, plus 35 ml of horned black fish blood. 80 ml of pure water, 5 drops of autumn cypress essence. As Audrey memorized the Seer Potion formula, they heard the sound of Mr. Error lightly tapping the bronze table with his knuckles. "Regarding this, perhaps I can offer some assistance," he said with a hint of a smile. "What assistance?" Miss Justice, Audrey, raised her head from rote memorization, looking at Mr. Error with curiosity and a desire to explore. The Hanged Man, Alger, felt his heart sink. "Assistance? I wouldn't necessarily call it assistance. Alger had seen too many examples of people offering sacrifices to unknown beings through seduction and accidents, reciting honored names, bringing danger, death, and madness. It's only the second gathering. Maintaining his vigilance, the hanged man, Alger, maintained a humble attitude, looking at Mr. Error, at the head of the bronze table, just like Miss Justice. He thought that if this gathering was truly problematic, and the danger was uncontrollable, he would have to try to report it to the higher-ups of the Storm Church. Even if there was no hope of advancement, it was better than losing his life. Double agent, Alger began planning his escape route. That being seemed to have noticed nothing, cared about nothing, just thought of this casually, and said casually, if you forget the potion formula, you can try using ancient Hermes, giant language, dragon language, elf language and other languages that have the ability to leverage supernatural powers, and recite the following incantation. He smiled and said in Loen, the embodiment of all incorrect errors, fallacies and loopholes, guiding the hand of fate. The embodiment of all incorrect errors, the embodiment of fallacies and loopholes, guiding the hand of fate. Miss Justice Audrey, who hadn't expected the method to be reciting an incantation, muttered these three descriptions, and a storm of shock surged in her heart. As a senior occult enthusiast, before being pulled into this gray fog, although she had not formally come into contact with extraordinary powers, she would always exchange information with other nobles during private gatherings, sharing what they knew, whether true or false. She was very clear about what the three-part description that Mr. Error spoke of represented in other rituals. It pointed to, the seven gods who looked down upon the entire world. This was an incantation almost equivalent to the Scarlet Lord, Hidden Mother, Queen of Misfortune and Terror, of the Goddess of the Night. And, the hanged man, Alger Wilson, who knew more and understood more than her, abruptly raised his head when he heard this honored name. Mr. Error also looked at him. Flamel, Nicholas Flamel, Mr. Error, the being who pulled them into this gray fog, was Nicholas Flamel. He had once heard the higher-ups of the church, heard a certain archbishop mention this being, and had also heard some investigators recite this honored name at sea. He was a high-ranking being of the Thief Pathway, a mysterious being greatly feared by the Storm Church, the master of Tingan City in the Loen Kingdom, an angel walking on the earth. No, judging from the information I've obtained about Tingan City, it's very likely that it was the Fourth Epoch, like the Abyss of Storms, the Dark Kingdom, the Land of Perfection, etc., when the gods still walked on the earth, a divine kingdom on earth. Have you forgotten? Amidst Alger's violent mental turmoil, he heard the voice of Mr. Error, with a hint of a smile. I said, this is a trial. He had noticed that the hanged man, Alger, had recognized him. He had noticed that the hanged man, Alger, had the intention of reporting him, but he did not care. This great being turned his head, looked at Miss Justice Audrey, who seemed not to have heard this conversation, and said in a gentle tone, I have a deal, I wonder if you want to accept it. What deal? Miss Justice Audrey had just been immersed in the absurdity of Mr. Error is actually equivalent to the Goddess of the Night, and Mr. Error is comparable to the gods. Hearing this, she forcibly shifted her attention from this matter to the transaction mentioned by Mr. Error. Some occult knowledge that you have not yet mastered, but that would be of great help to you. As a condition for the exchange, I need the diaries from Rosal Gustav's later years. The diaries from Rosal Gustav's later years. As expected, only such a thing is worth the attention of a powerhouse at Mr. Error's level. Audrey was first stunned, and then found that she was not surprised at all. It is said that the Intis consul, who later changed his name to Caesar, Emperor Rosal, had seen the blasphemy slate. It is said that the secret cards he created contain the 22 paths of the gods. Diaries. Are those diaries? Alger frowned slightly, keenly noticing a detail. Nicola, Mr. Error is obviously an ancient and powerful existence who has lived for thousands of years. He should have personally participated in the northern continent during Rosal's reign. What's more, Emperor Rosal went to Tingan City to study in his early years. It is well known in occult circles that Tingan City has an inseparable connection with Miskatonic University. Obviously, Emperor Rosal and Mr. Error have a strong connection. But why does Mr. Error want Emperor Rosal's diary, through them, instead of collecting it himself? Moreover, he specifically added the modifier, later years. It is said that Emperor Rosal's diary is written in a secret script or symbol of his own invention. Audrey had heard other noble children mention Emperor Rosal's manuscripts, but had never really seen them, and was quite curious for a while, and asked. Yes. Regaining his thoughts, Alger simply replied to Miss Justice. Some people think it's a unique set of occult symbols, others believe it's a kind of hieroglyph, but to this day, no one has found the correct way to interpret it, at least within my knowledge. Speaking of the latter, he turned his head to look at Mr. Error at the head of the long bronze table, seemingly seeking some kind of affirmation. Mr. Error sighed softly and reached out to grab a handful in the air. Audrey and Alger then saw that many pages, either real or false, appeared in Mr. Error's hand. Those pages floated in the mysterious space above the gray fog, and the symbols inside were strange, and were text that did not belong to any language or language in the North and South continents. The secret symbols created by Emperor Rosal, are indeed not something that exists in this era. And to some extent, these words created by Emperor Rosal are alive. Mr. Error smiled. In Rosal's later years, after a sudden change and becoming crazy, the diaries he wrote became more and more reflective of the characteristic of being alive. They are alive. The diary is alive. Emperor Rosal is also a Beander. Audrey exclaimed in a low voice, and then she realized a problem. The diary is alive. It is not important how the diary came alive. What is important is, after the diary comes alive, what impact will it have? You must know that many copies of Emperor Rosal's diary have been copied now. If the diary comes alive, will those copies also come alive? Audrey suddenly had a creepy feeling, a sense of déjà vu that Mr. Error was telling a ghost story. Mr. Error ignored Audrey's shock. This little girl at this age, and a little girl who has not experienced much occult baking, has too many things she can't imagine. The words on these diaries have been given a certain occult meaning and abstract concept. Of course, the copied diaries, and the diaries written by Rosal in his early years, also have a certain occult power, but it is not strong. Ordinary people will not be affected by it. Mr. Error continued. Among them, the diary content written by Emperor Rosal in his later years has a considerable degree of activity. Unfortunately, they don't like to have their secrets unearthed. The diary written by Emperor Rosal has the characteristic of being alive, and those diaries are avoiding Mr. Error, avoiding Tingen City. So, Mr. Error intends to let them collect Emperor Rosal's diary to explore some secrets. Hanged man, Alger began to brainstorm. Mr. Error smiled silently. Think about it, think more if you can think. As far as I know, Tingen University has lost a notebook from the Antigonus family, and the secret order is also searching for it. After explaining the rules of the acting method of, it's not mastery, it's digestion, it's not excavation, it's acting, and as an exchange, requesting Mr. Hangman and Miss Justice to collect the diaries left by the Transmigrator Senior Rosal Gustav, Klein shifted the topic to what he was still experiencing. This news is not only known to the people of Tingen University. The Secret Order, the Church of the Night, the Church of the Storm, etc., and the Beyonders who are closely related to them also know it. The Antigonus family's notebook, lost by Tingen University, and the Secret Order is searching for it. Mr. Hanged Man repeated, and smiled. I'm a little curious, what is the reaction from Miskatonic University? What will Miskatonic University's reaction be? What else could it be? Klein keenly noticed the problem, but he didn't want to speak up. That would destroy the fool's mysterious and profound image. At this time, Miss Justice asked in confusion. Why are you curious about this? Also, Miskatonic University, what kind of university is that? A school in another country. Mr. Hanged Man smiled and said, no, Miskatonic University is closely related to occultism, a true training school for occultists and beyonders. Miss Justice, you should know that the three major orthodox churches of the Loen Kingdom each have their own Beander teams, responsible for occult incidents in various regions. Among them, the Church of the Night Goddess has the Nighthawks, the Church of the Lord of Storms has the Punishers, and the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery has the Mechanics' Hearts. In Miskatonic University's Beander team is called the Investigators. Miskatonic University, Investigator, well, whether it's the name or the fit, it's indeed very Cthulhu. Western horror, how terrifying. However, the Transmigrator Senior deliberately chose such a name. Could it be that there really are some great old ones in this world, the stars aligning, the end is nigh, and things like that? The fool, Klein nodded almost imperceptibly, his posture still relaxed. He reasonably suspected this point. After all, the occult knowledge he learned from old Neil told him that there really are many things in this world that shouldn't be heard, can't be heard, shouldn't be seen, don't look, and, shouldn't be understood, can't be understood. And this highly coincides with the forbidden knowledge in the Cthulhu mythos. Just a simple coincidence. No way, would the Transmigrator Senior be so bored. Well, I know a little about these. Justice, Miss Audrey seemed to be lost in thought, and then cautiously opened her mouth and said, are there any differences between them? Let me take the Loen kingdom as an example. The Hanged Man, Mr. Alger said. The 7 orthodox churches of the northern continent all control at least one complete pathway, and are powerful organizations. Among them, the Church of the Night controls the complete, sleepless, pathway, the Church of the Storms controls the complete, sailor, pathway, and the Church of the God of Craftsmen controls the complete, scholar, pathway. Miskatonic University, on the other hand, controls the complete sequence potions of the seer and theft pathways. The Hanged Man, Mr. Alger said slowly. These words shocked Klein so much that he almost failed to maintain his mysterious and unpredictable state. Seer and thief pathways, Miskatonic University controls these 2 pathways. If that's the case, then the appearance of the secret order in Tingen City, and the disappearance of the Antigonus family notebook, is probably not an accidental coincidence. Klein's heart sank slightly, and he had a more intuitive impression of the reaction of Tingen University and the importance it attached to that notebook. Indeed, it was done by the secret order. After all, the secret order is also a secret organization that controls the seer pathway. The Antigonus family was a great noble family during the Solomon era of the Fourth Epoch, and also controlled the seer pathway. It matches up. Klein thought of the information he had obtained from Old Neil about secret organizations. The Secret Order, an ancient organization from the Fourth Epoch. Their members act strangely, and there are traces of their activity in Loen, Intis, Fursak, and other regions, but compared to the Psychology Alchemists, the Moses Ascetics, and other secret organizations, their public appearances are not many, and they are considered to be secret organizations with lower activity and higher safety. And the leader of such a secret organization is said to be an ancient angel. They are frantically pursuing things related to the Antigonus family, which means there is a big secret hidden. A university that controls the seer and theft pathways. Yes, the Hanged Man, Mr. Alger nodded slightly. This is also the object of attachment chosen by many wild beyonders. Compared to the faith of the orthodox gods, the conditions of Miskatonic University are not bad, and it is one of the few large occult organizations recognized by the countries of the northern continent, and not affected by regional issues, with corresponding branches and bases in various countries. Justice, Miss Audrey's eyes lit up slightly, and she asked, joining this university, well, I'm not saying joining is a wild beyander, but what are the requirements? After all, it should also undertake the functions of a normal university. I'm sorry, I don't know much about this either. The Hanged Man, Mr. Alger shook his head. I only know that the university will send invitations to ordinary people, or beyonders with extraordinary powers, according to certain rules. There are also internal recommendation quotas within the major churches, but the number is not very large. Among them, the number of beyonders from the Church of the Night who communicate, study, and develop at Miskatonic University is the largest of all the churches. You are a believer of the Goddess of the Night, right? If you have the opportunity, you can join the Church of the Night, become a Nighthawk, and then further contact that university. Okay. Klein listened carefully, his expression still calm. The Hanged Man, Mr. Alger obviously doesn't know enough about the existence of Miskatonic University. It's better to ask done, it's obviously faster this way. The fool, Klein let out a breath of turbid air. As this topic passed, Justice, Miss Audrey and the Hanged Man, Mr. Alger talked about some other topics, and this gathering came to an end. Today's harvest is not small. After Justice, Miss Audrey and the Hanged Man, Mr. Alger stood up, bowed, and left the gray fog above. Klein sat on the high-backed chair at the head of the long bronze table, his fingers interlaced. His eyes were deep as he looked at this gray-white, boundless, vast, and mysterious gray fog. This place should have a deep connection with my transmigration and Klein Moretti's resurrection, and now, after I become a beyander. When he was establishing a connection and pulling Justice, Miss Audrey and the Hanged Man, Mr. Alger up, he had already noticed one thing. That is, as a beyander, he has the spare capacity to touch another crimson star and pull people into the mysterious space above the gray fog. Able to pull another one from the real world to this space. Klein scanned the surrounding, crimson stars, but he didn't intend to try it impulsively. First of all, he doesn't know what the identity of the new person he pulls in will be, and what their attitude will be. After all, not everyone can seem to get what they need, like Justice, Miss Audrey and the Hanged Man, Mr. Alger, and are willing to hide his evil god gathering and not report it to the orthodox churches. If he pulls in someone like Dun Smith, Dun Ager, or Pettiglow Neal, then his newly established, secret organization, will immediately be exposed to the attention of the church, Miskatonic University, and the Transmigrator Senior. Moreover, it's not good to force people to join. No one wants to be inexplicably involved in mysterious events like this. Klein sighed and stood up. He sensed the existence of his body, and then began to imitate the heavy feeling of falling rapidly. The red tide produced by the crimson star retracted into his body. Above the gray fog, it once again fell into a dead silence. Klein didn't notice that eyes and worms were lurking above the gray fog, quietly watching everything here. Inside a huge, magnificent building, a young man wearing a black silk top hat and a matching tailcoat sat on a high-backed chair, watching the figures of the Hanged Man, Alger and Justice, Audrey disappear above the gray fog. His finger joints gently tapped the tabletop, creating two mirrored figures once again on the water-like surface, beneath the high-backed chairs of the Hanged Man and Justice. Their palms emerged from the ground, followed by their heads, bodies, and torsos. Once they had fully emerged from the water mirror of the ground, these two figures sat in the high-backed chairs previously occupied by Alger and Audrey before they departed. They were exactly identical to the Hanged Man, Alger, and Justice, Audrey. But this time, there were more than just two. The members of the Tarot Club increased once again, with a blurry figure appearing at the lowest seat of the bronze long table. Beside the Hanged Man, Mr. Hanged Man, another blurry figure appeared as well. "This is Mr. the Fool, and this is Mr. the Chariot," Nicholas Flamel said with a smile in his tone. "Welcome to your joining." Justice stood up and bowed to everyone. Subsequently, the Fool, sitting at the lowest seat of the bronze long table, and the Hanged Man, the Chariot, and Justice, sitting on either side of the bronze long table, all revealed the same smile as Nicholas Flamel. "All right, today's Tarot Club meeting will end here. As you wish." Great error. This was all incorrect. This was fundamentally wrong. The gray fog, already aware of the problem, trembled. Nicholas Flamel stood up, straightened his top hat, and strode towards the depths of this gray fog. Layers upon layers of boundless gray fog spread out before him, seemingly trying to obstruct him. Nicholas Flamel's body was gradually eroded by the grayish-white mist, but he continued relentlessly towards the core above the gray fog. His top hat was now stained with patches of dark cyan. Before long, Nicholas Flamel saw a radiant gate of light stained with a hint of dark cyan. Within that radiant gate of light, composed of countless layers of overlapping light spheres, the main body of each light sphere was a pile of twisted worms huddled together. They writhed and contorted madly. Countless transparent and translucent worms, operating under incomprehensible rules and unbearable combinations, formed such a bizarre and terrifying gate of light in the spirit world. Nicholas Flamel shifted his gaze from the radiant gate of light to either side. Black threads hung down from the gate of light. Beneath those things, resembling the spirit threads of a marionettist, hung one silk cocoon after another, almost completely transparent. Those silk cocoons swayed gently in the wind, blown in from who knows where. Within the silk cocoons, some had black skin, some were East Asian, some were white. Some wore jeans, some held mobile phones. Some were dressed in vibrant colors, some had beautiful features. They all possessed the aura of life, yet their eyes were tightly closed, as if they were the most lifelike dolls in this world, meticulously crafted. Nicholas Flamel sighed. "How long will it take for your potion to be fully digested?" A spirit worm that had also stowed away with countless time worms saw this scene as well. "It won't be long. Before the end of the Tingen City story, the 3 secret suppliant potions should be completely digested." Tang's voice came from the spirit worm. After a moment of pause, he asked in return, "Nicholas, do you also think I've gone a bit too far?" "No," Nicholas Flamel denied, "I am merely showing compassion as an informed person. Compassion for a person in a cocoon, compassion for a pitiful person who is destined to walk towards the Lord of the Mysteries, in the script of life. That was all. He was a marionette, How could he have the bodhisattva's heart to pity others and save others? This world will eventually usher in the apocalypse. There must be a pillar, the birth of a Lord of the Mysteries. A pillar is already the highest limit that can stabilize itself. Even devouring a Sephiroth that does not belong to oneself will inevitably lead to the revival of the primordial one. Having seen Russell Gustav's ending, having seen his desperate, angry, and wanting to tear everything apart madness, Nicholas Flamel knew that in the underlying logic of his bionic marionette module, there was absolutely no unimportant humanity like saving. He coldly processed all of his marionettist's orders. He was just a marionette. Even if he lived for 1,000 years, he still couldn't change such a set destiny. Nicholas Flamel's gaze swept over each silk cocoon. He took off his hat and saluted. This is destiny. It is also fate. Nicholas Flamel's figure suddenly disintegrated into countless transparent worms with 12 segments. Some of them moved towards the radiant gate of light stained with a hint of dark cyan, and some hovered above the countless silk cocoons, seemingly wanting to drill into them. The worms rushing towards the radiant gate of light were blocked by the gray fog, but the next moment, beneath the gray fog, Tang, wearing a deep and obscure cloak, raised his head once again. He put on the semi-transparent mask again. The authority of fooling and deception once again fooled the Source C's defense mechanism into becoming a little fool. The will of the celestial worthy of good fortune was constantly weakening with the arrival of the apocalypse. Two kings of angels, coupled with the authority of error, the gift of the Supreme Being, and with the help of Zhou Mingrui's identity as an ancient remnant of the person in the cocoon, through this tarot club meeting, through the ability of the Sequence 2 inches observer, Nicholas Flamel's false Sequence 1 avatar, carrying the pollution from future, destiny, supreme, dimension, and observation, officially knocked on the door of the Source C. Visiting the owner of the Source C, the time worms, disintegrated from Nicholas Flamel, constantly crawling towards the surroundings and towards the gate of light, gradually merged with the brilliant gate of light corresponding to the Source C. Nicholas Flamel, whose body had disintegrated for the most part, smiled. Not far away, the members of the Tarot Club were also smiling. They laughed one by one, leaning back and forth, laughing until their bodies cracked, laughing into clusters of extremely crazed, huddled worms. The gray fog trembled. Within the light spheres composed of countless huddled worms, more and more worms that originally did not belong to this gate of light gradually appeared. They integrated into the twisted, huddled worm swarms, bit by bit, slowly, permeating into the brilliant gate of light. On the gate of light, the people in countless, silk cocoons, seemed to feel this cheerful and joyful atmosphere. In their slumbering dreams, the ancient remnants also showed smiles. Backland, Queensborough, the maid was sprawled on the door like a spider. Her eyes were wide open, staring unblinkingly at the door, her gaze seemingly able to penetrate the wooden barrier and see Miss Audrey Hall inside, writing out the audience potion formula. Remembered it, didn't remember it, remembered it, ah, what a pity. Seemingly having seen the flawless potion formula, the maid's expression shifted from exaggerated joy back to her usual gentleness. The golden retriever looked at the unusually behaving servant with confusion, but as a dog, its intelligence wasn't enough to process something of this magnitude. Just as the golden retriever was whining with boredom, wanting to go forward and nip at the strange maid's skirt, asking her to play, the strangely behaving servant came down from the door she had been clinging to. She straightened her skirt, her expression becoming completely gentle and normal, as if the person who had just been sprawled on the door, staring intently at the person inside, wasn't her at all. After finishing tidying herself and becoming proper again, she looked at the golden retriever and smiled faintly. Susie, are you hungry? You must drink the next potion properly, okay. The golden retriever didn't understand, it only felt that the maid in front of it was behaving strangely, but what bad intentions could a golden retriever have? It was only puzzled for a moment before happily wanting to snuggle with its playmate. At this moment, the door to Audrey Hall's room opened slightly, and Audrey, with a smile that curved her lips upward, revealing a brilliant, sun-like smile, walked out of the room brightly. The golden retriever stopped running towards the maid and changed direction, running towards Audrey. The maid behind her would occasionally pass other servants, who would also show Susie, and Miss Audrey Hall, an extremely consistent smile. Good afternoon, Miss Audrey, would you like to have afternoon tea first? After clearly knowing that, error, Mr. was Nicholas Flamel of Tingen City, Alger Wilson sat blankly in a windowless basement for a long time, then he muttered to himself in an almost murmuring voice. Perhaps, this is also an opportunity. Nicholas Flamel, the Archangel of the Seer Pathway, a great existence almost equal to a god, and that grey fog, that gathering, I am afraid that Alger would never be able to reach that world in the Storm Church in his entire life. That can even be compared to the meeting before the gods. Whether there are more opportunities in the Storm Church, or in a gathering with an Archangel, there is no need to think about it. The insects in the room stopped one after another, looking at this pirate. After finishing the gathering and recovering his spirituality a little, Klein walked out of 47 Gold Rose Street. According to convention, he should now go to 32 Red Rose Street to continue today's learning with Old Neil, but the information obtained at the gathering made Klein think a lot, and he planned to change his plan first. Judging from the information obtained from the gathering, the notes of the Secret Order and the Antigonus family, established by the Transcendent predecessors, have intersections and commonalities. Pedigree also mentioned before that becoming a seer can make it easier for them to find the lost Antigonus family's notes from Tingen University. Seer, Pathway. The potion names from Sequence 9 to Sequence 5 of this pathway flashed through Klein's mind. Well, the Secret Order holds the complete sequences of the Seer and Thief pathways, while the Secret Society is an ancient organization from the Fourth Epoch, and they are now chasing after things from the Antigonus family during the Solomon Empire period, also from the Fourth Epoch. The original owner and the original owner's friend, Welch Nia, both died because of that Antigonus family's notes, and before their deaths, they seem to have become marionettes of that Antigonus family's notes. In Sequence 5 of the Seer pathway, the potion name is Marionettist. That is to say, the Antigonus family's notes are likely to involve the power of high sequence of the Seer pathway, which has attracted the attention of the secret society. When Klein thought of this, he suddenly stopped. He murmured to himself in his heart. When the members of the secret society arrived at the Tingen University library, the seal in the forbidden area of Tingen University happened to have a problem, allowing Welch to take away the notes, and to this day, its whereabouts are still unknown. Happened, is it really so, happened, that the notes disappeared at the same time that the members of the secret society went to Tingen University? Is it really just a simple coincidence? Klein vaguely realized that, besides the secret order, the Tingen University, and the secret society, there seemed to be an invisible hand that was silently manipulating and planning all of this. If this is true, that hidden force should not be the secret society's backup plan, otherwise, there is no reason why the Antigonus family's notes would not be in the hands of the secret society members, but instead were taken away by Welch. However, it may also be my illusion, maybe there really is such a coincidental thing. Klein muttered softly, and the foot that was about to step onto the sidewalk took a turn. Klein prepared to go to 32 Red Rose Street to study with Old Neil after going to Tingen University to find the original owner's friend, Dun Eggers. The deputy chief of the Tingen University Garrison Department told me that I should have an internal recommendation spot for the secret order. Well, I don't know if I can see that deputy chief. Of course, understanding his recommended spot was one of the reasons Klein went to Tingen University, and another reason was that he wanted to remind Dun of the coincidence issue. If Tingen University has already reached the corresponding conclusion, then I can also get some information. In any case, there is no harm. Of course, Klein still hoped that this was just a simple coincidence. After walking for a while, Klein boarded the public carriage. When the carriage arrived at Tingen University, Klein first prepared to find his former mentor, Mr. Azik Eggers. Outside Tingen University, Klein had just gotten off the carriage and walked dozens of meters, not far from the imposing gate of Tingen University, when he brushed past a man wearing a hood and looking like he was in a hurry. Klein's intuition moved slightly, and he stopped silently. He turned his head slightly, stood in place, watching the back of the man who was hurrying away, and frowned. For some reason, Klein always felt that he had seen this person somewhere. Shaking his head, Klein stepped into Tingen University and headed to the History Department office, preparing to visit Mr. Azik first. However, the result was a pity. Mr. Azik was not in the office. Professor Azik went to Khoi University. Khoi University recently acquired a mummy from the Fourth Epoch, said to be from the southern continent. This is very helpful for exploring the ancient history and culture of the southern continent during the Fourth Epoch. They invited Professor Azik to help. In the History Department office, another history professor, who didn't have any classes at the moment but was familiar to Klein, said with a smile. "All right, thank you, Professor Upton." Klein said politely, Then, as if casually, he asked, I heard something was lost from the library. Professor Upton, do you know about this? Not everyone at Tingen University is an extraordinary, a person with supernatural powers. Klein wasn't sure if Professor Upton was one of the informed, so he intended to use this to judge. If he was, then as a member of the Nighthawks, Klein could also use this to gather information. If not, then chatting about gossip with a familiar professor was only natural. The library. Professor Upton pondered for a moment, then shook his head and asked curiously, something was lost from the library. What was lost? The police haven't said anything. I'm not very clear either. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, Klein bid farewell to Professor Upton and left the history department office. The original Klein didn't know where Dunn lived, and his father, Mr. Azik, was not at Tingen University either. Klein stood under a tree and pondered for a moment, preparing to go to the police station to take a look. If there was no one informed at the police station either, then he would return to 32 Red Rose Street and tell Dunn Smith. Telling the captain, the problem shouldn't be too big. What are you doing here? A somewhat surprised voice came from Klein's side. Klein turned his head and happened to see Azik and Dunn returning. The two were each holding some things, seemingly some books. Klein hurried forward to help and saw that the books that Dunn and Mr. Azik were carrying were mostly history books about the customs and culture of the southern continent during the Fourth Epoch. They're books from the library. It's a bit troublesome to rummage through things there, so we simply moved them back to the office to look at them slowly. You don't even care about your son. Azik glanced at Dunn upon hearing this and said amusedly, want me to take them? Ah, that won't be necessary. You're not saying you don't care about me now. What are you talking about, haha? Klein, okay, you guys have a really good relationship. I heard from Professor Upton that Khoi University recently obtained a mummy from the southern continent. While helping to carry the books, Klein chatted with Mr. Azik and Dunn. Azik nodded, yes, a mummy from the Fourth Epoch, from the era when the Balam Empire ruled the southern continent, belonging to a nobleman of the Balam Empire. Khoi University asked me to help decipher the patterns and writing on the funerary objects, which will help them with the ancient history books of the Fourth Epoch that they are currently writing. After moving the books to the history department office, Mr. Azik obviously had to work, so Klein walked out of the office with Dunn. Mr. Azik is really hardworking, Klein sighed, but he really likes this job. Dunn shrugged and asked as he walked, you probably didn't come here specifically to see my dad, right? Klein smiled, Mr. Azik gave me a lot of help during my university years. Logically speaking, I should visit often. Speaking to this point, Klein then changed the subject and said, however, this time it's really not. Dunn, don't you think that the timing of the loss of the Antigonus family notebook from the library and the time when the members of the secret order came to the library to look for books is too coincidental? Too coincidental? Hearing this, Dunn pondered for a moment, then his brows furrowed into a river shape. You mean, there is a third party involved? The one who caused the library's sealing ritual to fail wasn't a member of the secret order. I don't rule out this possibility. Klein said seriously, after all, such a coincidental aging, no matter how you look at it, the probability isn't very high. Manipulating probability, manipulating coincidences through pathways or sealed artifacts. Dunn fell silent, seemingly considering the likelihood of this possibility. After a long while, he nodded, I understand, I will remind the others. Klein secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then jokingly asked, by the way, I wonder if Vice Captain Pearl's promise from before is still valid. You mean the spot to enter Miskatonic? You should be assigned to the Nighthawks now. If the Nighthawks don't give you a spot, the spot here at the police station can still be used. Good. Klein nodded. By the way, how are your ritual magic studies going? Dunn suddenly asked. Klein was stunned for a moment, then pondered for a moment and replied cautiously, it's all right, I guess. Taking the exam, Dunn said with a smile, Miskatonic is going to hold a ritualist professional qualification certification exam soon. If you pass the exam, there are subsidies. Klein, oh, he was a little tempted. That was a subsidy, real money. Who doesn't love money? Watching Klein board the public carriage and leave, Dunn stood under the gate of Tingen University for a long time. Seeing the public carriage gradually disappear from his sight, Dunn retracted his gaze. He discovered it, but he actually reported it to me, because of the extraordinary characteristics gathering. A somewhat inexplicable sense of humor. But he himself carried 3+1, and Klein carried the Saphira Castle, so it was a reasonable development that they would gather together. After pondering for a moment, Dunn's gaze gradually became deep and profound. He reached out to the side and pulled out an ordinary quill from the image of the historical gap. On a page that appeared out of thin air, he picked up the pen and wrote a paragraph. When the last word fell, the notebook disappeared, and the quill returned to the image of the historical gap. Dunn's eyes became clear again. What should I eat tonight? How about trying mooncake stir-fried with chili peppers? I wonder if Sequence 1 will have physiological reactions like diarrhea. 47 Golden Rose Street. Old Neil was not at the security company on 32 Red Rose Street in the evening. Klein studied on his own for a while and returned to his residence. He had a meeting today and learned a lot of new things. Klein lay tiredly on the bed and quickly fell into a dream. In the dream, Klein saw the scene of himself getting off the public carriage outside Tingen University in the afternoon. He saw the figure that brushed past him. He saw the corner of the hat and clothes, and the side of the face seen from a specific angle. He had seen that face before. That was the faceless of the secret order, Nix Miller. In an instant, Klein woke up in shock. His spirituality reminded him that the person this afternoon was a member of the secret order. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. It is said that criminals easily return to the scene of the crime. Is this also common in the world of mysticism? Otherwise, why would people say that a haunted house where the murderer hasn't been caught is uninhabitable? However, hasn't Tingen University noticed? Or rather, have they noticed but are just monitoring and preparing to take action? Klein hurriedly put on his clothes. He didn't go directly to Tingen University. Instead, he moved through the now quiet alleyways in the dead of night, planning to go to 32 Red Rose Street first, to seek help from Dunn Smith. After all, he is not considered a formal employee of Tingen University, and he has already formally graduated from there. Without his student status, and not being familiar with the other people in the Tingen University Security Department, if he goes there at this hour and triggers something, he might go in whole but come out in pieces, bruised and battered. After going downstairs and saying hello to the landlady, Klein hurriedly left 47 Golden Rose Street. His figure was hidden in the night. There were very few pedestrians on the road. Only occasional college students and migrant workers, seemingly out to buy midnight snacks, passed by. On both sides of the street, the light from the gas lamps illuminated one block after another, but the darkness here still outweighed the area that the gas lamps could illuminate. Above the black night, a round of scarlet moonlight hung high, swaying gently. When passing a street corner, Klein suddenly stopped. His spiritual premonition warned him fiercely. Klein looked at a street lamp not far away and saw a shadow under the street lamp that didn't belong to the street lamp. He slowly raised his head and saw something under the street lamp not far away, swaying there. It was a corpse with a hemp rope around its neck, suspended in midair. When he clearly saw the appearance of that corpse, Klein felt his hair stand on end and his scalp tingle. It was the member of the esoteric order he met this afternoon, Nix Miller. It was Nix Miller he dreamed of. He's dead, he died here, .. My divination results tell me that this corpse is indeed Nix Miller, not a substitute or a copy or anything like that. Unable to perform spirit channeling, Nix Miller's spirit body has been affected by a high-level being. However, according to the spirituality remaining in the spirit body, Nix Miller had already become a marionette before his death. The light from the gas lamps illuminated the surrounding scene where Nix Miller's corpse was hanging, and Welch's family's large ritual magic, used to cover up the truth, once again enveloped the area near the street lamp where the corpse was found. Pettigrew handed a cup of warm water to Klein, who was sitting on a long chair, still looking a little sluggish and unnatural. Calm down first. Klein reached out and took the slightly warm water cup, rubbing the cup wall, absorbing the temperature from it, trying to calm his heart that had just been thrown into chaos by the excessive fright. Although we have already obtained what happened at that time through divination, I still want to hear what you think about this matter. Klein took a sip of the warm water in the cup, listening to his heartbeat gradually returning, freeing himself from the feeling of his scalp exploding and his whole body freezing in place. He quickly and clearly told Pettigrew the whole story, how he went to Tingen University during the day to find Tang Eggers to inquire about Miskatonic University, met Nix Miller on the road, didn't recognize him at the time, but dreamed of that scene at night, recalled who the other party was, and was about to go out to ask Dunn Smith for help, but saw Nix Miller's corpse on the road. You suspect that the mastermind behind the Antigonus family notebook theft case in the Tingen University library is killing people to silence them. Since Klein didn't intend to hide anything, he naturally told Pettigrew the guess he had told Tang, the coincidence. Pettigrew was also pondering this matter. As a wizard, he had seen many bizarre and strange things. Hearing this, Klein nodded heavily. If it were before, I wouldn't dare to be sure whether there was a third-party force in the Antigonus family notebook theft case. He said to Pettigrew in a low voice, but now, I'm 80% sure. From the time Klein encountered Nix Miller to the time he discovered that it was Nix Miller through dreams and spiritual warnings, the time span between these two events was not even 12 hours, not even half a day. Although the act of turning Nix Miller into a marionette was most likely a change brought about by the Antigonus family notebook, Nix Miller, who clearly hadn't found the notebook, was turned into a marionette. It's impossible that the esoteric order, which hadn't made much progress for a long time, suddenly made rapid progress in a short period of time, right? This coincidence is almost impossible to cover up with coincidence. Klein was sure that there must be something wrong with it. The autopsy results are out. The Beander of the corpse collector pathway quickly completed the preliminary examination of Nix Miller's corpse, which had already been turned into a marionette, and whose spirit body had completely rotted and dissipated, making it impossible to perform spirit channeling or divination. The deceased, a member of the esoteric order, a sequence 5 marionettist of the seer pathway, Nix Miller. There are no Beander characteristics on his body. The degree of marionettization is very high, at least not something a marionettist of the same level can do quickly. According to the remaining spiritual reaction, the deceased was a marionette that had been abandoned by a marionettist for at least 2 hours. The essence of a marionette is a dead person. After the spirit body line is abandoned by the marionettist, the marionette will return to its original state. Such problems can be easily determined through a post-mortem examination by the corpse collector pathway. Klein looked over and found that it was not any of the Nighthawks he knew, or any of the Beyonders in the Tingen University security department. But it was a young man wearing black clothes, with an open book, ears of wheat, flowers, stars, curves and planes embroidered on his left chest, forming a strange uniform with various complex esoteric symbols, with a cold expression and pale skin. It's someone from Miskatonic University, Pettigrew whispered to Klein. This is a blatant provocation. Tingen University and Miskatonic University cannot let things calm down like this. Klein nodded, but didn't plan to go up and talk to them now. First, Klein wasn't sure of the other party's attitude. Second, he was really scared. Nix Miller's visit to Tingen University once again attracted the attention of the Beyonders at Tingen University. The Beyonders in the Tingen University Security Department originally planned to secretly monitor him, hoping to capture him and all the members of the secret order in Tingen in one fell swoop. However, they didn't expect that not only did Nix Miller himself disappear under their noses, but also several Tingen University Beyonders responsible for monitoring him also disappeared. Shortly after Klein discovered Nix Miller's body hanging on a street lamp, the Beyonders at Tingen University quickly found the location as well, preventing any accidents. However, Nix Miller, as a key clue and under strict supervision by Tingen University, was hung under a street lamp for at least 2 hours. During that time, not a single pedestrian noticed a corpse there, the corpse just swaying gently, drifting in the wind. Until Klein passed by, and the corpse turned its body, its dead, mindless eyes staring at Klein. When he encountered him at Tingen University, was that a living person? Or a marionette? Did the Antigonus family's notebook really brush past the secret order? Or was Nix Miller already being manipulated by that Antigonus family notebook at that time? Cthulhu's world, it's really dangerous. Silently exhaling a breath, Klein shook his head with a wry smile. He wanted to go home even more. In this world, you really could die anytime, anywhere. The people surrounding the corpse exchanged words for a while. The corpse was covered with a white cloth, and sent onto a carriage, ready to be taken to Tingen University for further analysis. Tingen is the city of miracles, a city governed by error. Even if the spirit body is truly annihilated, they can still obtain the information they want through various mystical means. Let's go, we'll go back to 32 Red Rose Street. Don't stay on Golden Rose Street during this period. The mastermind behind this has obviously noticed you, and might take action against you, Pettigrew said. Klein took a long breath and said in a deep voice, all right. 32 Red Rose Street, inside the brightly lit 6-story building. Dunn Smith and Leonard Mitchell, as sleepless, were naturally more energetic as the night went on. Old Neil and the others had already gone back to rest and were not here now. Miss Daly, as a Sequence 5 gatekeeper, was currently assisting the Miskatonic University investigators with the investigation. After several night watchers roughly reconstructed the scene at that time from Pettigrew's narration and Klein's account, they looked at each other, unsure of what to say for a moment. A key clue was inexplicably turned into a marionette and hung on the side of the road. Miskatonic University had also sent investigators to deal with the matter, but there were no clues yet. The whereabouts of the Antigonus family's notebook were still unknown, and many things seemed even more confusing. Finally, Leonard Mitchell, with his poetic temperament, spoke first. He pinched the monocle in his left eye socket and said to Klein, "I really don't know whether to say you're lucky or unlucky." According to the information shared by the Church of Evernight and Miskatonic University, Nix Miller was already a Sequence 5 of the seer pathway, a master marionettist. A seer who is a master marionettist being marionetted by someone else, it's clear that the activation level of the Antigonus family's notebook alone can't achieve this. Leonard used his knuckle to push up the lower edge of his monocle, straightened his monocle, and said with a smile, "So, I think Klein's suspicion is very reasonable. The loss of the Antigonus family's notebook from Tingen University, and the marionetting of Nix Miller of the Secret Order, behind these two things, there is likely a force that we are not familiar with, but is quite powerful. He, she, or it, wants a predetermined development." Hearing this, Klein couldn't help but glance at this night watcher colleague who had a poetic temperament, but gave him a strange, incoordinated feeling. He only saw that the other party was also looking at him at the same time, behind the monocle, the slightly narrowed eyes flashing with an ambiguous light. This guy, could he have seen something? Klein secretly slandered, but on the surface, he still appeared quite calm. There was no way, he had to be calm. He didn't want to be tied to the stake in this era. Old Neil said that there were indeed cases in Intis where extremely heinous beyonders were tied to the stake and burned alive with purification flames. Tisk tisk tisk, thinking about that scene, Klein felt phantom limb pain. Well, that's it. Dunn Smith pondered for a while and made a final decision. Klein, you'll stay here recently. Neil, you'll act together with him. This was a form of protection. After all, Klein already had become a seer, and was also considered a member of the Night Watchers. Pettigrew nodded. "Okay, Captain." Klein did the same. "Okay, Captain. System, are you sure he really doesn't have anything special?" "Of course, not." Behind the mechanical, rigid voice, a more cheerful low laugh was not heard by Leonard. "Tingen, it's getting more and more interesting. As the person closest to the Lord of the Mysteries, he's actually trying to re-manipulate the birth of a Lord of the Mysteries. Let me guess, why is that? Tingen University School of Medicine, Underground Morgue. Nix Miller, who had just been sent here, sat up straight from under the white cloth. The people pushing the trolley ignored Nix Miller as if he was a resurrected corpse. They sent the trolley to a certain morgue, where Nix Miller got off the trolley. As he walked, he began to pull off his own head. The sound of tearing and breaking came from Nix Miller's neck. Flesh and spine were broken inch by inch under Nix Miller's terrifying brute force. Then, the headless corpse put its head on the trolley, and the corpse swayed, pulling open the sliding cabinet in the morgue where the corpses were stored. He groped for the things in the sliding cabinet, and quickly found one of them. It was a bloody, warm, lifelike head. As the top faceless, you naturally need the top disguise technique. That head opened its eyes, and then, with a strange smile, it was installed on the headless torso. The people pushing the trolley behind him stood there quietly. They all turned their heads, seemingly penetrating the wall, looking at Miss Daly, who was communicating with the Miskatonic University investigator not far outside the morgue. They all showed an extremely consistent smile of anticipation on their faces. Accompanied by Officer Pellegrew, Klein returned home. He explained his situation to Benson and Melissa, indicating that he needed to help out at Tingen University for a while and wouldn't be staying at home. Klein quickly packed his personal belongings and toiletries and moved into the office building of the Nighthawks in Tingen. This place was much safer than Golden Wheat Street, and it could also reduce the possibility of Benson and Melissa encountering accidents. After this, Klein's tense nerves were finally able to relax a little. As a true rookie, a fledgling mystic novice, Klein knew that he still lacked a lot of knowledge and had little accumulation. Therefore, he began to carefully study what old Neil had taught him. During his stay at 32 Red Rose Street, Dunn also took the time to come over and brought a lot of professional certificates for the Ritualistic Mage Qualification exam. As a Sequence 9 of the Seer pathway, ritualistic magic is inherently a strength. Also, the next exam is on August 4th, so work hard, our Seer. Looking at the books that were half his height, Klein suddenly empathized with Cohenley's thoughts when he first came to 32 Red Rose Street to prepare for this certificate. Whether it was theory, practice, or the combination of various ritualistic magics, the selection of corresponding symbolic objects, or the various incantations that needed to be memorized, it was all a massive amount of information. All right, a study buddy has appeared. In addition to studying quietly on his own, Klein also found Cohenley to explore the vastness of knowledge together and prevent himself from silently drowning in the ocean of knowledge alone. Pain.jpg. But the subsidies are really tempting. Klein had never encountered such a good thing as getting a large subsidy for passing a certificate exam before his transmigration, but he encountered it after his transmigration. Thanks to the great transmigrator predecessors. The ritualistic magic compiled and arranged by Miskatonic University is not the same as those ritualistic magics that point to gods. Under normal circumstances, if one is not a member of a church that worships a god, and tries to use symbolic objects and domains that completely contradict the god they worship, the greatest possibility is that they will not receive a response, or they will receive a malicious response, but Miskatonic University's ritualistic magic is different. Their ritualistic magic structure seems to have an independent, almost omnipotent object of prayer, which can make the direction of ritualistic magic complete and the response fast, and can cope with various situations, achieving the role of a stable front row, back row, and support for a ritualistic mage. As long as the ritualistic mage is given time and materials, it is not impossible for a Sequence 9 to solo a Sequence 6. Although Klein was full of yearning and vague doubts about this, when he saw descriptions of incantations such as, O Lurker of the Deep Sea, O Guardian of the Stars, O Worm of the Drilling Star, in the book, Complete Analysis of Ritual Incantations, he only felt that his SAN value was dropping rapidly. Okay, he completely understood the reason for this cross-sequence beating. Speaking of which, wouldn't reciting this kind of incantation really get some kind of strange response? Or would he become permanently alienated, suffer mental pollution, or something like that? Or is the essence of this world really a world derived from the Cthulhu myth, or a fan fiction or something, that he just happened to not have read and transmigrated into in a daze? Dunn Smith arranged for Klein to have a separate office and lounge. Usually, 32 Red Rose Street also had its own small cafeteria, and he could eat enough food without spending money. If it weren't for the fact that there was still a certain amount of physical training every day, Klein felt that he might have gained several pounds. The food here is also quite good. Recently, under the double protection of the church and Tingen University, Klein was relieved a lot, waiting for the final results from Tingen University and Miskatonic University. Tingen City is a city guarded by a demigod, that is, a powerful existence of Sequence 2 or Sequence 1. Even if the third party in the notebook theft case wants to achieve some kind of purpose, they should not directly confront the power represented by Tingen City. And the Nighthawks are obviously an official team connected with Miskatonic University. Dealing with Klein would mean dealing with the entire Nighthawks and directly confronting Miskatonic University. Unless the power behind them also possesses the strength of Sequence 2 or Sequence 1. But why would such a figure target an Antigonus family notebook that looks important but obviously doesn't reach the angel level? But no matter what, Klein was among the safest people by staying at the Nighthawks headquarters in Tingen City. On weekdays, in addition to studying those tongue-twisting incantations and learning from old Neil, the fighting master, how to compress the incantations to open them with shorter incantations, Klein also planned to participate in the club for seers, located at 17 Bluebell Street. This was a club that old Neil had mentioned before, exclusively for beyonders of the seer pathway. Through the letter of introduction written by Dunn Smith, Klein came into contact with one of the largest mystical circles in Tingen City. By carriage, passing through several streets, Klein and Pellegru arrived in front of a building that looked ordinary on the outside, but he only felt that it had nothing to do with him and only wanted to ignore it. This is 17 Bluebell Street. Pellegru looked at the building in front of him and said thoughtfully, "If I were to use the description in the novels written by Emperor Rosal, this should be a spell called Muggle Repelling." There are many such buildings in Tingen City built in the downtown area that belong to mysticism. Ordinary people will only ignore them and will not enter. Only people who clearly know the address and function can step into them. Emperor Rosal has been dead for more than 100 years, and his novels are still exerting their power. Klein nodded. The two walked one after the other into this seemingly unremarkable building. The first floor of 17 Bluebell Street was a rather ancient-looking hall. The gray stone brick floor felt a little cold to step on. The bright ore lamps neutralized the sunlight shining in from outside, which seemed to suddenly dim in the first-floor hall, making it look a little dim. Mr. Klein Moretti, the receptionist at 17 Bluebell Street, was wearing a common summer dress for ladies and had a professional smile on her face. She stamped the letter of introduction that Klein handed over with an official seal and then returned it to Klein. At the same time, she also gave him a badge composed of half an cupule I and half a twisted line. "We are very happy to have you join. Next, a servant will take you to familiarize yourself with some of the facilities of this club and introduce you to other seers." As she said this, the front desk lady paused slightly, as if she had a momentary glitch, like a toy that had just lost connection. But quickly, a smile returned to her face, and she continued, "Mr. Moretti, please go to the third floor. Mr. Lillard wants to see you." Lillard. Klein looked at Pettigrew, who was accompanying him. A senior member of the Seer Club, a Sequence 5 marionettist. At 17 Bluebell Street, this semi-public club has several senior members, and all senior members are at least Sequence 5 marionettists. They take turns on duty here. As long as you don't cause trouble here, it's just as safe as the Nighthawks, Tingen City headquarters. Several Sequence 5s. Captain Dunn is only a Sequence 6 soul appender. Klein couldn't help but click his tongue in amazement. Tingen City is indeed full of hidden talents. Pettigrew then pointed to the front desk lady, signaling Klein with his eyes. Klein's gaze followed Pettigrew's finger and landed on the front desk lady who was writing, "Visitor registration." A marionette, he carefully examined the front desk lady's appearance, demeanor, and posture. If it weren't for Pettigrew's reminder, he wouldn't have been able to distinguish the difference between the living person and the marionette. Hiss, is this Sequence 5? Klein's heart couldn't help but tremble, and then he couldn't help but yearn for it. Putting aside everything else, the Sequence 7 magician, the Sequence 6 faceless, and the Sequence 5 marionettist, this pathway seems to become more and more bizarre as you go further. The Seer pathway is terrifying. Speaking of which, Pettigrew, do you know what the Sequence 4 potion name for the Seer pathway is called? Whenever he talked about marionettists, Klein naturally thought of the question he had asked Old Neil before, which Old Neil couldn't answer. Klein hadn't found a chance to ask Captain Dunn Smith about this question before, but now that he happened to be in the Seer Club, Klein asked Pettigrew, who also knew a lot and was a core member of the Nighthawks. Pettigrew shook his head at this question. "Ask the captain about this. Although I am a Sequence 7, and considered a pretty good extraordinary within the Nighthawks, the information about the demigod level is only known in detail by the captains of the Nighthawks and Punishers in Tingen City. Of course, this is because Tingen City is special. The captains of the vocational teams in other dioceses, even if they reach the sequence of captain, may not be able to access the knowledge of the demigod level. Because Tingen City is a place governed by a certain god, there are more opportunities here." Klein instantly understood what Pettigrew meant. "Mr. Neal, your visitor registration card." The front desk lady officially gave Pettigrew a signed note, which was to avoid triggering certain insurances here. After Pettigrew got the registration card, he and Klein walked towards the stairs, preparing to go to the third floor. "Look, isn't the Seer Club a model of this kind of thing? You need to know that in other places besides Tingen City, it is quite difficult to hold and fix such a large-scale occult gathering. The churches in Miskatonic University in various places strictly control the movements of wild beyonders and will not easily allow this kind of semi-public occult gathering to appear. If someone openly holds this kind of semi-public gathering, then the next moment, the Nighthawks, Punishers, Mechanical Hearts, and investigators will kick down the door, each saying, 'Konnichiwa, Note 1. Klein was thoughtful. He had previously learned about the Nighthawks' internal potion promotion rules. If you want to obtain the potion formula and materials from within the church, you need to make corresponding contributions. However, if you obtain the potion formula and materials within the Seer Club, then you shouldn't need to accumulate enough contributions to advance. Naturally, there is no problem with that. We recognize the actions of our members to improve their strength in a legal and compliant manner as much as possible. Pedigree agreed with this. If you can improve your strength through the Seer Club, it will make you stronger and able to cope with more dangers. So, there are more opportunities in big cities. Klein silently slandered in his heart. Soon, the two arrived on the 3rd floor. This 7-story building seemed to be owned by the Seer Club. The interior was decorated in a classical style, with many Western medieval decorations that Klein had seen before he transmigrated. Under the bright light of the ore lamp, Klein and Pedigree quickly met one of the senior members of the Seer Club, a Sequence 5 marionettist, Lillard, under the guidance of a waiter. He was a rather amiable-looking old man, but neither Klein nor Pedigree could be sure if this was his true appearance. After all, the Sequence 6 of this pathway is called Faceless. Faceless are extremely good at disguising themselves. The appearance exposed by a Faceless is not necessarily trustworthy. Lillard communicated with Pedigree and Klein very gently for a while. Then, the old man looked at Klein, who was standing next to Pedigree, and said with a smile, "You were recommended by Dunn. Well, not bad, very strong intuition. You were able to survive the Antigonus family notebook loss incident, so your luck is also good." "No, if my luck was good enough, I wouldn't have encountered this kind of thing at all." Klein complained in his heart, but on the surface, he showed at least the minimum respect for a high-ranking person. "Well, as a benefit for joining the club, what do you want?" "Haha, it's rare to meet a newcomer who is pleasing to the eye. The people in the club are either no longer seers, or they are playing the, you play, I guess, game with their marionettes here every day, which is a headache." Lillard looked at Klein and suggested with a smile, "The clown potion formula and some of the main materials, how about that? You should need contributions to exchange for it within the Nighthawks." Klein was stunned. "Is this the world of Big Brother? You're just giving me the clown and the main materials directly. Is there such a good thing?" Lillard smiled meaningfully. "If you don't want it, well, the magician's potion formula, it's not impossible." Klein quickly shook his head. No need to refuse. It's nothing to an old fellow like me who is about to be buried in the ground." Lillard said quite generously. Good, a max-level Big Brother enters the novice village. Immediately upon joining, he received the membership benefit, a promise from the Diviner Club to acquire the clown potion formula and some of the main ingredients. As Klein left the Diviner Club, he still felt a little dazed. Tisk, 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 this is what it's like when a big shot makes a move, not dragging things out at all. After saying goodbye to Lillard, the senior member, Klein and Pettigrew walked around Blue Moon Street 17 to familiarize themselves with the Diviner Pathways Club. During this time, Klein also saw other diviners. They seemed to know Pettigrew, who introduced Klein, the Nighthawk diviner, to them. In the Diviner Club, the vast majority, most of the time, are Sequence 9 diviners, or diviners, who come to earn some extra money. The latter refers to extraordinary beings of the Diviner Pathway who have digested the Diviner Potion, advanced their sequence, but plan to earn pocket money through divination. With the acting method, by playing the role of a true diviner in the Diviner Club, you should be able to quickly digest the Diviner Potion and advance to clown. I will work hard. After the two strolled around for a while, they walked out of 17 Blue Moon Street. On the 3rd floor of this Diviner Club building, on the glass window of a room, one face after another appeared, calmly watching Klein and Pettigrew's departing figures. "We have intelligence on the secret order. Dunn Smith brought good news on Friday. Miskatonic University, through the information retrieved from the corpse of Nix Miller, they have captured other members of the secret order in Tingen City. However, that member's condition is very bad. He is now being treated in the psychiatric department of St. Peter's Hospital. We need to go there." "Gone mad?" Pettigrew asked in confusion. Was it caused by the contamination of the Antigonus family's notebook, leading to loss of control? Dunn Smith shook his head. The specific situation is unknown. This is a possible guess. We'll only know when we get there. Neil, Klein, and Leonard, you come with me. After obtaining accurate information, depending on the specific situation at that time, we may need to directly participate in the retrieval of the notebook. All right, Captain. Leonard, who had a poet's temperament and wore a monocle carved from crystal in his left eye socket, spoke first. Klein and Pettigrew also nodded. The group quickly prepared and set off for St. Peter's Hospital in a carriage. Street. Peter's Hospital, Psychiatric Department. Compared to the inpatient building Klein had visited last time, St. Peter's psychiatric department was far from the crowds, and the surrounding buildings were not so dense. It looked like a large park, with fresh green plants everywhere, which seemed to soothe the restlessness in people's hearts just by looking at it. The audience's masterpiece, Klein guessed. After all, the audience's sequence 7 is called Psychologist, and St. Peter's psychiatric department should not lack corresponding extraordinary beings. The group, led by a nurse, prepared to go to the office of the department director on the 8th floor to inquire about the condition of the mad secret order patient. From the mystical knowledge and mystical history Klein had recently learned, he had also obtained more information about the Antigonus family. He knew that this family had been suppressed by the Church of the Night Goddess, which was why they gradually declined during the glorious Solomon Empire of the Fourth Epoch. The reason why, even though the lost Antigonus family notebook came from Tingen University, it belonged to Miskatonic University, the Nighthawks cared so much was partly because of the connection between the Church of the Night and Miskatonic University, and because he, a believer of the Night Goddess, had now joined the Nighthawks as a diviner. The other aspect was the problem of the Antigonus family. Whether it was the secret order or the Church of the Night, they all seemed to be quite interested in the affairs of the Antigonus family, with different focuses. However, why did the goddess's church suppress the Antigonus family of the diviner pathway? There should be a deeper secret here. As the elevator ascended, everyone remained silent. However, when the elevator reached the 6th floor, the elevator door suddenly opened. Someone outside the door had pressed the elevator button, preparing to take the elevator. Klein looked over and saw a young man wearing a white coat, who should have been full of vigor, but whose face was quite numb. Klein's diviner intuition suddenly moved, and he immediately remembered who this doctor in the white coat was. Klein had met this doctor not long ago. At that time, he was visiting his predecessor's mother and encountered a patient diagnosed with persecutory delusions and schizophrenia in the corridor. Why is he here? No, a patient, wearing a white coat, is he cosplaying as a doctor? When Klein looked at the position of the other party's name tag, he clearly saw the words, Psychiatrist, Admi Saul, written on the name tag. He really is a doctor at St. Peter's psychiatric department. Klein felt quite puzzled, but this was St. Peter's hospital's own business, and he didn't want to ask too much. Perhaps Admi Saul, this former mental illness patient, had recovered after a few days of treatment. In the world of extraordinary beings, anything seems possible. Klein silently shook his head. Dr. Admi Saul entered the elevator, seemingly wanting to go to the director's office with them. When Dr. Admi Saul entered the elevator, revealing the scene of the corridor behind him, Klein scanned the 6th floor corridor outside the elevator door and saw several strange rooms with iron doors and observation windows. The 6th floor seemed to be a ward for confining mentally ill patients. Entering Klein's line of sight, the first ward had a strange black iron ring hanging on the door, the second ward had an oil painting that seemed to depict the starry sky hanging on the door. The third ward had nothing hanging, but there was a sign, with something written on it, presumably the patient's name, but the distance was too far, and Klein couldn't see it clearly. The first 3 wards were all quiet, extremely quiet. From Klein's perspective, it was difficult to see the specific situation in the wards from this angle, but the 4th ward was an exception. In the 4th ward, through an observation window, Klein saw something wriggling inside. It seemed that the patient living in the ward was pressing his face tightly against the window, squeezing against the window, as if trying to squeeze out. Klein saw that slightly distorted face. His mouth opened and closed, looking like he was saying something, but neither Klein nor the others could hear it clearly. The rest, there seemed to be a few more, but as the elevator doors closed, Klein could no longer see them. As the elevator doors closed, Klein seemed to hear a distant, extremely distant, sound of banging on a door. He quickly put what he had seen out of his mind and didn't think about the patient in the 4th ward or what he was saying. Leonard Mitchell had witnessed the abnormality in the 6th floor corridor outside the door the entire time. He quietly pinched the monocle in his left eye socket. In the reflection of the monocle, there seemed to be a young man wearing a black pointed soft hat and a matching magician's robe, with a wide forehead and thin face, silently chuckling. The words were, he mouthed them, but neither Leonard, Dunn, Petty Gull, the nurse, nor Ademir Saul could hear him. Run away quickly. The corners of his mouth stretched wider and wider into a smile, as if he had seen something hilarious, completely, truly, unable to close his mouth. Most of the people in the psychiatric department of St. Peter's hospital have mental illnesses. As the floors increase, the severity of the illness seems to increase accordingly. Klein shook his head inwardly. If they are out of control beyonders, perhaps they would also be locked up in a mental hospital. He just didn't know if Peter's hospital had any means of treating loss of control. They should have some. The audience pathway is very good at this type of treatment. The 8th floor arrived, and Dr. Ademir Saul took the lead out of the elevator. The nurse leading the way behind him, Klein, Leonard, Dunn, and others also walked out one after another. 8th floor, the director of psychiatry's office. The person who received them was the director of the psychiatric department, an amiable old woman who appeared to be over 50 years old. After entering the office, Dr. Ademir Saul consciously went to the corner and waited without speaking. "Good afternoon, Ms. Lettuce." "Good afternoon, Mr. Smith." After the usual pleasantries, she took out a stack of documents from her desk drawer after listening to the patient information described by Dunn Smith, flipping through them as she spoke. "We have been doing a specific mental analysis since we received this patient. The patient's mental state is very poor. He seems to think that the world he is in is not real, unable to distinguish the boundary between reality and fantasy, and accompanied by suicidal tendencies. Another, schizophrenic, patient. Another, schizophrenic, patient." Klein couldn't help but look subtly at Dr. Ademir Saul in the corner, trying to find the madness he had seen before on him. But Dr. Ademir Saul was very calm, as if he was immersed in his own world, unaware of the outside world, standing in the corner like a silent wax figure. There wasn't even a hint of the madness of constantly shouting, "Save me, I'm going to die," and, "This world is fake." From the patient's mental world, we found clues to the Antigonus family notebook. Nix Miller found the notebook and gave it to him. Now, the notebook is in the hands of a man named Riel Bieber. We have notified Tingen University and Miskatonic University about the specific situation. You can go see the patient later. The old woman said slowly. After finishing speaking, she looked at Klein with a kind expression. "Child, have you been having any nightmares lately?" "No." Klein was stunned, not expecting to be asked. He was about to shake his head, but suddenly remembered a nightmare he had had before. Although he couldn't remember what was in that nightmare, Klein still had some impression of the terrifying and bizarre feeling. He honestly replied, "Yes, I did have nightmares after the Antigonus family notebook disappeared, but I can't remember the content of those nightmares. I haven't had any nightmares recently either. This is a normal manifestation. This proves that the power polluting you is constantly weakening over time." The wrinkles on the old woman's face were stacked together, but she still looked so gentle. "I remember that the Nighthawks have annual physical examinations. You can find a time to come to St. Peter's for a more detailed physical examination. This can better ensure your health, and if there are any problems, they can be resolved as soon as possible. Don't think it doesn't matter just because you are young and feel good about yourself. Free physical examination, I will." But the captain never mentioned this. Petty Gull thought for a while and whispered beside Klein, "He forgot." "But you didn't remind me." Klein looked at Petty Gull, who cleared his throat and turned his head away. "Oh, he forgot too. There have been too many things happening recently, and for people, forgetting unimportant things is not a heinous crime." When they came out of the director of psychiatry's office, Dr. Ademir Saul did not come out with them. Klein, Dunn, and others then took the elevator to the 2nd floor to see the supposedly insane member of the secret order. He was in the ward, crying and laughing, sometimes quiet, sometimes frantically saying, "It's him. It's him. It's all him." It made Klein almost start singing, "Little Nezha," or something. This person really has a beautiful mental state. Klein sighed silently. It doesn't look like loss of control, it looks like he was scared crazy. Leonard pinched the monocle he was wearing in his left eye socket and said with a smile, "What you said makes this even more terrifying." Klein complained inwardly. After confirming the state of this secret order member, the group planned to leave. Afterward, they would go to Tingen University to directly meet with the security department of Tingen University and the investigators of Miskatonic University to directly capture Riel Bieber and retrieve the notebook. When passing by the corridor outside the psychiatric ward, Klein saw a middle-aged man in a patient's gown sitting on the lawn outside the ward. The man had a thick golden beard and a pair of pure, childlike golden eyes. He looked over, and Klein noticed that the other party seemed to be holding a strange doll with 5 heads in his hand, which looked very scary. "Number 3, we are going back," the nurse shouted from not far away from the middle-aged man in the patient's gown. Number 3. Klein didn't understand, but the middle-aged man holding the terrifying cloth doll had already slowly stood up and returned to the psychiatric ward behind him under the nurse's guidance. Leonard turned his head and glanced at the middle-aged man. Then, he nonchalantly turned his head back. Chapter 25 Bieber, Tingen University, Security Department. When Klein and his party arrived, Deputy Director Pearl was flipping through a thick stack of papers in her hand. "You're here." Deputy Director Pearl put down what she was holding and looked at Dunn. Dunn nodded and took the initiative to ask, "Where is Riel Bieber? Is the notebook of the Antigonus family definitely on him?" Deputy Director Pearl nodded. "Yes, we have already put him under surveillance." This time, Miskatonic University also attaches great importance to it. They sent a demigod to assist. Sent a demigod to help, Klein nodded. Indeed, having a demigod to keep guard makes people feel safe. After all, who knows what's hidden behind this matter? As for the notebook of the Antigonus family, it is currently confirmed to be on Riel Bieber. Judging from the current information and the intelligence transmitted from Miskatonic University, we suspect that Riel Bieber is a descendant of the Antigonus family. The secret society wants to use the notebook of the Antigonus family and the descendants of the Antigonus family to achieve some unknown condition. Dunn said. Yes. Deputy Director Pearl nodded in agreement. After the secret society sent the notebook to Riel Bieber, with the help of the power of that notebook, Riel Bieber's condition will become more and more dangerous as time goes by. He may also be able to obtain extraordinary power from the high-ranking members of the seer pathway through that notebook, and obtain the corresponding seer gift. Dunn pondered for a moment and asked with a slightly solemn expression, "What is the use of that notebook? It shouldn't just be a notebook of the descendants of the Antigonus family, right?" Deputy Director Pearl glanced at the people around her, and then looked at Dunn and the people he brought, as if she was considering whether to reveal this matter. Soon, she nodded. "Well, this matter is a bit complicated to talk about." She said, "You should all know that the extraordinary people of the seer pathway always hear strange whispers when they are promoted, and hear sounds similar to Hornassus and Phlegre. According to the decryption experts of Miskatonic University and the reverse divination of the high-ranking members of the seer pathway, what we can currently determine is that the ancestor of the Antigonus family, the ancestor who was once sequence 1 of the seer pathway, is still alive." Still alive? Klein was a little stunned by Deputy Director Pearl's description, an ancient one who has lived from the Solomon Empire period of the Fourth Epoch to the present. Has lived for so long. The high-ranking members of the God pathway are really like what they were called in the ancient times, worthy of being gods. No, it may also be different depending on the pathway, but Miskatonic University has the seer and theft pathways, and the ancestor of the Antigonus family is the seer pathway. Klein immediately thought of the Transmigrator Senior who founded Miskatonic University. According to the information he had obtained, the founding period of Miskatonic University should be in the early Fifth Epoch. If the founder of Miskatonic University, the Transmigrator Senior, was also a high-ranking member, an angel of Sequence 2 or Sequence 1, maybe he could live to this time. Could it be that the incarnation of all incorrect errors, fallacies, and loopholes refers to the Transmigrator Senior? He reasonably guessed this point, and secretly planned in his mind whether to collect more information about that person to assist in his judgment. That's right. Deputy Director Pearl seemed to see the surprise of the few people, and smiled brightly. You should also know that high-ranking members of the same pathway can influence the low-ranking members of that pathway to a certain extent. The descriptions of Hornassus and Phlegre that the seers hear during their promotion period are suspected to come from the ancestor of the Antigonus family, the great nobleman of the Solomon period. Mr. Klein Moretti, you are already a seer, aren't you? Have you ever heard that voice before? She asked Klein. Klein looked at Dunn, and seeing Dunn nod to him, he said, Yes, Ms. Pearl, I did hear that voice when I became a seer. Ah, that's because this is in Tingen. If it were outside, hearing this voice, you might see something you shouldn't see, think of something you shouldn't think of, and become that person's secret puppet. Deputy Director Pearl's mouth slightly curved, scaring him. It's not that serious. Dunn comforted Klein. At most, the auditory and visual hallucinations are a bit serious, but it won't reach that level. Klein was speechless. This was not in the field of knowledge he had mastered. After Deputy Director Pearl teased the seers, she continued to explain. Phlegre is the name of an ancient god in the ancient era, the Second Epoch. His title in that era was Destruction Demon Wolf Flegre, a crazy and cruel ancient god, who also mastered the seer pathway. We haven't figured out the Hornassus point yet. Maybe there is a treasure buried by the Antigonus family on the Hornassus Mountains, or maybe there are other reasons. The investigators of Miskatonic University have not been able to find out the corresponding reasons. Seers from Tingen City once went to the Hornassus Mountains, but since they entered the Hornassus Mountains, they have disappeared, which may also prove that the Hornassus Mountains are quite dangerous. As for the notebook in the forbidden area of the Tingen University Library, the content of that notebook will show different content according to the pathway and sequence of the reader. The seer potion formula is probably recorded to the sequence 2 level, and the rest are mostly strange anecdotes from all over the world, customs and various characteristics. But this is not the point. It comes from the hand of a descendant who was severely polluted by that ancestor of Antigonus. Antigonus's ancestor who has lived from the Solomon Empire period to the present, according to the information we have interpreted from the notebook. His will has come alive in the body of that severely polluted descendant. Come alive from the descendants. Leonard was also stunned when he heard this. He subconsciously pinched the monocle in his left eye socket and said in a low voice that people around him could hear, "It's really a qualified spooky story." Dunn's expression became solemn. "You mean?" Deputy Director Pearl smiled. "So we cannot rule out the possibility that part of the will of the ancestor of the Antigonus family has revived in Riel Bieber. In addition, Deputy Director Pearl patted a stack of papers that seemed to have been printed out. That crazy member of the secret society, he wrote something very interesting. The inner circle of the esoteric order seems to be experiencing anomalies as well. Ah, why are there so many problems with seers lately? Is there some significance to this pathway?" Dunn was somewhat interested in what the crazed esoteric order member had written, and so was Klein. But now was not the time to discuss this. "Let's talk about the esoteric order's problems later," said Vice Captain Pearl. "It's almost time. Let's go directly to the scene." With that, Pearl took out a pink door from his pocket. Klein was just wondering how Vice Captain Pearl managed to fit the door into his pocket, but after seeing the pink door, he was stunned again, and immediately wanted to kowtow to his fellow transmigrator in his heart. "You even managed to create this thing." It was a pink door of the same scale as a standard room door, but the door frame had many complex and strange symbols that seemed to be cast. Miskatonic's technology. The name is quite strange. Vice Captain Pearl thought for a moment, imitating the way that person called it. "It seems to be called Anywhere Door, or something, but I prefer to call it a teleportation door. This is the masterpiece of a certain craftsman, combining some of the abilities of the apprentice pathway. It can freely pass unhindered within a certain range, teleporting at will. The effect is quite good, similar to the Sequence 5 ability of the apprentice pathway, the Traveler, but it is a bit more troublesome to use and cannot be used in normal combat." As the doorknob was turned, the scene behind the door was already a certain dock area of Tingen University. It directly crosses the spirit world, producing extraordinary abilities similar to teleportation. As a wizard, Pettigrew was naturally full of interest in this product. After arriving at the dock area of Tingen City from Tingen University, Vice Captain Pearl saw Tang Eggers standing not far away. "Tang, what's the situation?" "Riel Bieber has been inside for a while." Tang held a coin and pointed to a warehouse not far away. "Miskatonic's demigod is already in position, but I suspect there are still people from the esoteric order nearby, and their sequence should not be low, at least sequence 5. What does the esoteric order want to do with that notebook? Obtain the power of Ancestor Antigonus, or use it as some kind of medium?" Vice Captain Pearl touched his chin with his index finger and couldn't help but sigh. One secret sorcerer has already died, and one magician has gone crazy. With this perseverance and determination, they will succeed no matter what they do. Sequence 5 is not something common, and in a place where there is obviously a demigod participating in the battle, and facing Miskatonic, the Nighthawks, and the garrison, even if that secret sorcerer is equipped with 3 puppets, plus extraordinary items and some strange things, he can at most guarantee that he will not be killed. After all, this is Tingen City, this is the city of miracles. The only thing to worry about is whether the mastermind who is suspected of manipulating the notebook theft will take action here, Dunn said in a deep voice. Tang flipped the coin, looked at the heads and tails, and then put it away. He said, "Probably not. Judging from various reactions and coincidences, the mastermind should not have the strength to confront us head-on, especially since this is Tingen City, an area where attention can be drawn at any time. The sequence 5 of the esoteric order may not be able to attract that person's attention and directly attack, but if that guy who arranged the coincidences dares to show his face, it is estimated that the only ending will be instant kill. Okay, let's calculate the time. It's almost time. Yes. Vice Captain Pearl reached out and looked at the mechanical watch hanging on his wrist. It's time. Time for what? Aren't we going to stop him? Vice Captain Pearl said that the longer it takes, the more serious Riel Bieber's problem will become. Klein asked Tang. Tang was puzzled. Stop him from doing what? Stop Riel Bieber from doing bad things with that notebook. Don't worry, the people nearby have been evacuated in advance, leaving only our people. And who knows what that bad thing is doing inside, and there are people from the esoteric order nearby. Without knowing what they want to do, naturally we will cover the area with firepower and wipe them all out in one go. Cover the area with firepower, in one go, wipe them all out. Klein was stunned by the words Tang said one after another. A flash of lightning struck in his mind, and he had an inspiration: use cannons. Almost, but it's a mystical cannon. Tang smiled. I'll show you a firework display. Look carefully. As the city of miracles, how can there be no guarantees? He reached out and took out a golden pocket watch from his coat pocket, and opened it with a snap. Well, it's time. Klein suddenly felt that the wind direction in the port seemed to have changed. The sunny sky suddenly became a little gloomy, and the dark clouds in the sky gradually swirled, forming a huge vortex directly above the warehouse where Riel Bieber was. Everyone looked up at the sky, seeing the constantly gathering, huge vortex, and the things above the vortex. There was light flickering there. It was a brilliant, scorching light. That light made everyone who looked directly at it feel a sense of admiration and amazement from the bottom of their hearts. Not far away, in the warehouse, the figure, whose body was constantly being crawled in and out by wriggling insects, whose body was swelling, covering his head, and with two eyes, one up and one down, looked extremely distorted, also stopped his convulsions. One spirit body thread after another broke, his movements stagnated, as if the manipulator had withdrawn his will, making the puppet on the stage lose its backbone and become a little dull. Suddenly, he raised his head, his eyes staring straight at the top. He seemed to penetrate the restraints of the ceiling, seeing the huge vortex, and the few extremely brilliant rays of light hidden in the vortex. Let us praise the sun. The dazzling beam of light that seemed to be able to blind everyone fell from the sky, instantly covering everything around the dock area factory. In the scorching, crazy sunlight, dots of black sludge were hidden inside, turning the center of the sunlight beam into black sunlight. The black sunlight fell, penetrated the eaves, and directly bombarded Riel Bieber's body. As an abandoned secret puppet, Riel Bieber let out a miserable roar. Then, on the already rotting spirit body, a trace of strange humanity appeared. The sun gave me humanity. Countless transparent, translucent insects crawled out of Riel Bieber's eyes, dyed with a layer of dull black. The sunlight swept across the entire warehouse district where Riel Bieber was located. Under the scorching sun, both evil spirits and pollution were completely annihilated by the light descending from the sky. This was part of Tingen City's defense system. The spiritual world coordinates were locked through on-site surveys by ritualistic mages, followed by a beam of light clearing a large area, eliminating everything that needed to be eliminated. Is it over just like that? Klein was simply dumbfounded, looking at the scene in front of him that had been razed to the ground. The shock made his mind feel somewhat numb. Tingen City is known as the City of Miracles, how could it not have some tricks up its sleeve? I just wonder if that extraordinary from the esoteric order was within the range of the light beam. Tang clapped his hands and looked at Vice Captain Pearl to the side. Vice Captain, let's go then. All right. Vice Captain Pearl nodded, smiling as he said, hopefully, that notebook of the Antigonus family wasn't completely burned away by the afterglow of the sun. Leonard pinched the monocle on his left eye, the lens reflecting the desolate area before him. Being directly hit by the sun's light beam, if that notebook didn't have the protection of high-level power, it would definitely be purified by Miskatonic's high-altitude attack. Tingen City's defense system is quite frightening sometimes. Just as Klein and the others were about to move, Vice Captain Pearl suddenly stopped. What? Dunn slightly tilted his head, but his thoughts began to experience a clear sense of stagnation. Marionette, Master. Before they could search for the whereabouts of the notebook, whether it was Pearl, Dunn, Leonard, Pettigrew, Tang, or Klein, their thoughts simultaneously fell into a state of obvious stagnation. Klein was familiar with this bizarre state of stagnation. It was the extraordinary ability of Sequence 5 of the Seer Pathway, and one of the most difficult abilities to deal with below a demigod. Marionetization, marionetization, not, marionette master, it's, a trickmaster, level, marionetization, the esoteric order, came, with, a, demigod. Vice Captain Pearl spoke slowly, his tone somewhat stilted. They were ambushed, and Vice Captain Pearl was the extraordinary with the highest sequence among everyone present, so the degree of marionetization was also the lightest among everyone. Must, quickly, find, out, where, that, trickmaster, is. At the same time, on the original site of the warehouse, which had been completely destroyed by the sun's light beam, a swelling mass of flesh suddenly burst out of the charred ground. It was so huge, and its body was covered with countless transparent, translucent insects. That was Riel Bieber. He didn't die from the sun's bombardment. Instead, due to the pollution of that Antigonus family notebook, he entered some kind of bizarre, runaway state. He had become a monster. After the monster emerged from the ground, it didn't seem to have adapted to its body yet. It awkwardly manipulated its bloated, fat body, familiarizing itself with its new, insect-covered form. Then, as if attracted by something, it suddenly turned its face, which had grown countless eyes, ears, noses, and mouths, towards Vice Captain Pearl, towards the direction where Klein was. It was attracted by something. It was the person who created it. It was the person who created it. Chaotic, insane, newly born, growing out of the shell of a marionette, Riel Bieber, who had regained humanity and self, looked into the distance. Madness and chaos, mixed with the power of pollution and endowment, combined to form an incomparably terrifying monster. Its eyesight was excellent, and it saw several people standing there, and among those people, it saw a figure whose body was somewhat stiff and whose eyes were calm. That was its creator, that was its marionette master. It roared madly and shrilly, dragging its huge, terrifying body and charging towards that side. Why did you do this to me? You gave me life. Why take it away like this? Why? Warning. The bionic marionette module has undergone a certain degree of mutation due to the black sun's light. Host, please deal with it as soon as possible. The huge, unknown creature, with transparent, translucent insects constantly wriggling out of its body, took a step towards Tang's location. The heavy, massive body made the ground tremble violently. Its existence was like a product of extreme spiritual pollution, causing everything that saw it, heard its silent roar, to suffer a blunt blow as if from the depths of their souls. Klein's eyes were bloodshot, and his already sluggish body became even stiffer, almost making him give up resisting. Must break the situation. Dunn slowly looked into the distance. As a soul appraiser, Dunn could sense the spirits hidden in the pure environment around him due to the sun's bombardment just now. The Trickmaster's illusion could indeed deceive extraordinary beings below Sequence 4, but the spiritual environment here was a little too pure all of a sudden, making the Trickmaster and the spirits of the marionettes he controlled suddenly become like lighthouses on the sea in the dark night, found by Dunn. He discovered the location of the Trickmaster hidden nearby. Vice Captain Pearl's eyes quickly reflected streams of dark flames, and invisible ice and spider silk unknowingly covered the vicinity. The figure who was manipulating their spiritual threads was instantly stained with dark flames and covered by ice. A pain altar. The figure stained with flames and ice, bound by the rapidly approaching spider silk, quickly turned into a paper figurine, which was quickly enveloped by flames and ice, and devoured completely. At the same time, Klein heard movement behind him. His seer intuition was triggered, and the great sense of danger made him subconsciously roll on the spot. But because of the stagnation of his thoughts and the stiffness of his body, he failed to completely escape the area covered by the attack of the person who was sneaking up on him from behind. Was that the marionette that had just been hiding? Seeing this, Pettigrew immediately took out some blackened powder from his hidden pocket and sprinkled it towards Klein's back. As the flames of spiritual friction ignited the blackened powder, a huge wall of sulfur blocked Klein and the marionette that appeared behind him, forming a barrier. The huge figure dragged a long sword in its hand. Klein only saw the figure insert the long sword into the ground, seemingly to create a storm of light. However, the invisible spider silk quickly wrapped around him. Dunn simultaneously locked onto the Hermetic Order's Trickmaster, who had just transformed into a paper figure, using his nightmare ability to drag the opponent into a dreamscape, disrupting the Trickmaster's control over his marionettes. But the Trickmaster's body transformed once again, becoming a figure with a height and appearance extremely similar to the Trickmaster himself. It was another marionette. Trickmasters can switch positions with their marionettes. Bang, bang, bang. The marionette transformation continued, but as the battle intensified, this process was interrupted time and time again. The sound of air being torn apart came from not far away. The shells struck Tang, who seemed to have not yet recovered from the marionette transformation. Klein watched as his good friend's figure gradually flattened and shrunk, becoming a rusty paper figure, hit by the air shells and torn to shreds. Paper substitute. Seeing that the first wave of air shells had missed its target, the Trickmaster, once again hidden in the shadows, began to quietly manipulate the weakest person present, Klein Moretti. He wanted to first transform this seer of the same pathway into his marionette, and then, using the Trickmaster's ability to separate spirit-body threads, create a dazzling firework within the enemy's defensive circle. At the same time, he heard a low chanting sound in his ear. Ah, the danger of fear, the scarlet hope. At least one thing is true, this life flies by. One thing is true, all else is lies. Once the flower blooms, it will bid farewell to the world. The power of slumber rapidly leveraged the surrounding spirituality, attempting to pull the Trickmaster hidden in the shadows into the dreamscape created by the nightmare. For other Beyonders, the most terrifying thing about facing a Trickmaster is that you can never be sure whether the person in front of you is the real body or his marionette, unless the marionette is of poor quality. Behind Klein, the one who was ambushing this seer was a very burly marionette, but at this moment, the burly marionette suddenly flickered, and a middle-aged man in a black robe appeared there. He stretched out his arm towards Klein, his withered arm seeming to pass through the sulfur wall created by Pettiglow using powder, grabbing Tang Aegis, who was grabbing Klein and trying to drag him away. Not far away, the monster that Riel Bieber had transformed into had already rushed to a place not far from them. We must speed things up. Before Miskatonic and Tingen University react, we must take the notebook away first. This Trickmaster of the Hermetic Order, who had infiltrated Tingen City after Nix Miller's death to continue the mission of the Hermetic Order's higher-ups, once again focused his attention on the people in front of him. As far as he was concerned, the most dangerous one was the deputy chief of the security department of Tingen University, but that was just a pain alchemist, not yet at the level of despair, and it would only take time to deal with him, a demigod. The second most dangerous was Tang Aegis of Miskatonic, who looked gentle and refined, more like a researcher than a Beyonder. This person always gave him a somewhat sinister feeling, but his spiritual intuition did not give him an overly dangerous warning. The reason why the Hermetic Order's Trickmaster was sure that this was the second most dangerous person present, even though the other party's sequence was not high, was because he was a Miskatonic ritualistic mage. A ritualistic mage, interesting. Let's turn him into a marionette and slowly dig out the secrets of Miskatonic. Even a Trickmaster who is good at divination cannot be sure whether this guy has brought the kind of suicidal, large-scale destructive portable ritual magic with him. What's more, this is Tingen City, a city that will attract the attention of a certain being. He must act quickly and decisively. He must not give them time to call for reinforcements, nor can he allow the demigods lurking nearby to provide support. Before they dealt with the monster that Riel Bieber had turned into, he had to turn these people into his marionettes as soon as possible, and then retrieve the notebook. Suddenly, a marionette appeared beside the Hermetic Order's Trickmaster. He clenched his fists and shouted sternly at Tang, who was trying to manipulate the flames to counterattack, imprison. Tang's movements suddenly stiffened. He raised his eyes and looked at the Hermetic Order's Trickmaster, who had begun to manipulate the lines of his spirit body. The Hermetic Order's Trickmaster was simultaneously manipulating other marionettes, suppressing the Soul Soother of the Nighthawks and the Pain Alchemist of Tingen University. In just 15 seconds at most, this would be his marionette. Of course, he also liked the Pain Alchemist from the Tingen University Security Department. If he could feed her to the level of a Despair Alchemist, then she would be even more worthy of collection. Just as this Trickmaster was fantasizing, a voice suddenly rang in his head. So you're called Hua Shang, right? It was a very thick voice. Seeming to see the person's confusion, he shouted again in the Trickmaster's head, I'm calling you Hua Shang, I'm asking you if you're Hua Shang. Hermetic Order's Trickmaster. Okay, you are now called Hua Shang, and now I'm going to deprive you of your abilities. Another voice rang out. Hermetic Order's Trickmaster. What is this? Wait, you are parasites. He instantly realized something and immediately prepared to switch positions with his marionette. Miskatonic's support, a thief pathway demigod, Hua Shang, what Hua Shang? Hee, you guessed right, but there's no reward. Ah, Mr. Flammel's system is really interesting. The renaming system that can rename all parasites to Hua Shang, and the deprivation system that can deprive all Hua Shang of their abilities. To think that a useless ability could be developed in this way. Wait, it seems we parasitized the wrong target. Not far away, the burly figure who had just stood behind Klein paused. The voice from before continued to ring in the mind of the Hermetic Order's trickmaster who was disguised as a marionette. You almost fooled us, kid, haha, you were even planning to turn Mr. Aegis into your marionette. Go home and sleep, little guy. After lightly parasitizing this unlucky trickmaster and giving him a big beating of love, the two parasites looked at Tang Aegis, who was standing in place. How was it? How was it? Wasn't their support great? Then, they saw, next to Mr. Aegis, looking at them, wearing a monocle. Damn it, Amon, Amon. The two parasites instantly turned into screaming chickens. In the monocle worn in Leonard's left eye socket, the young man wearing a pointed soft hat pinched his own monocle. Ah, so noisy, it's disturbing his eyes. Wait, Amon saw that the two parasites were only horrified for a moment when they saw him, and then they became eager to try. What do you want to do? For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.